What if everything you think you know about history is incomplete? Imagine an object buried for centuries that looks like it was made yesterday or belongs in a future we haven't even reached. Something with a level of craftsmanship, complexity, or design that simply shouldn't exist in the time it came from. These aren't just ancient relics, they are historical anomalies, pieces of a puzzle that refuse to fit into the established timeline of human progress. They whisper of lost knowledge, of advanced civilizations that may have risen and fallen long before our recorded history began, leaving behind only these cryptic clues for us to find. Welcome to the world of out-of-place artifacts, or OOP arts, where every discovery has the power to rewrite the story of our past and challenge the very foundations of archaeology and science. This video is a journey into that mystery. We are about to explore 25 of the most baffling objects ever unearthed, artifacts that defy logical explanation and conventional dating methods. From ancient batteries and precision-cut stone to maps of lands that shouldn't have been known, each item on this list is a testament to the fact that our ancestors were far more ingenious, or perhaps connected to knowledge we can't even comprehend, than our history books often give them credit for. These are not mere curiosities, they are profound enigmas that have sparked decades of debate, inspired countless theories, and left even the most skeptical experts scratching their heads. They exist in that thrilling gray area where established science meets the outright bizarre, and where every answer seems to only lead to more compelling questions. So prepare to have your perception of time, technology, and human achievement completely upended. We will travel across the globe and through the millennia, examining evidence that ranges from scientifically perplexing to seemingly supernatural. This is more than a list, it's an investigation into the greatest unsolved mysteries of our ancient world, a collection of stories that promise to ignite your curiosity and perhaps even change the way you see our place in history. The journey into the unknown starts now. Our journey into the impossible begins at the bottom of the sea, near the tiny Greek island of Antikythera. In the year 1900, sponge divers stumbled upon the wreck of a Roman cargo ship, a treasure trove of statues and artifacts from the 1st century BC. Among the broken marble and ancient pottery, they recovered a corroded lump of bronze and wood that seemed unremarkable at first. It was only years later, when archaeologists began to carefully clean and examine it, that they realized they were holding what many call the world's first computer. This is the Antikythera Mechanism. What makes this object so utterly astonishing is its intricate internal structure. When you look at X-ray and CT scan images, you don't see a solid block of corrosion. You see a complex clockwork of at least 30 precise interlocking bronze gears. This wasn't a simple tool, it was a sophisticated mechanical computer operated by a hand crank. Its dials and pointers, inscribed with tiny Greek lettering, could track the cycles of the moon, predict solar and lunar eclipses, and even model the irregular motions of the planets known to the ancient Greeks. It could even account for tiny gravitational wobbles in the moon's orbit, a phenomenon we now call lunar anomaly. This device could essentially calculate the future positions of celestial bodies with stunning accuracy. The profound implication here is that this level of mechanical engineering and astronomical understanding simply was not supposed to exist around 100 BC. For centuries, historians believed technology of this complexity didn't appear until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe over 1,000 years later. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters that timeline. It forces us to confront a radical possibility that a school of brilliant scientists and engineers in ancient Greece possessed knowledge that was then lost for millennia, perhaps in the fires of the Library of Alexandria or in other upheavals of the classical world. The ongoing debates about its origins are as fascinating as the device itself. Who exactly built it? The leading theory points to the school of Archimedes in Syracuse, or perhaps the legendary Academy of Posidonius on the island of Rhodes. But the truth is, we don't know for sure. This single artifact suggests an entire lost tradition of high mechanical craftsmanship. It hints at a golden age of Greek technology that our historical records have barely glimpsed. The Antikythera Mechanism is not just a collection of gears, it is a ghost, a whisper from a past that was far more advanced and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. From the depths of the Mediterranean Sea, we now travel to the dusty soil of Mesopotamia, where another object challenges our perception of ancient innovation. In 1936, workers excavating for a railway near Baghdad, in what was then part of the Parthian Empire, uncovered a set of very peculiar clay jars. These weren't ordinary pottery. Each one was about 5 inches tall and contained a sealed copper cylinder, and within that cylinder was a single iron rod, all held in place by an asphalt plug. To the untrained eye, they looked like unusual storage containers, but to German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who studied them a few years later, they presented a startling possibility. He proposed that these clay pots were, in fact, ancient electric batteries. The theory is both simple and brilliant. If you were to fill one of these jars with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, you would create a basic chemical reaction. The acidic electrolyte would interact with the two different metals, the copper cylinder acting as a positive cathode and the iron rod as a negative anode. This interaction would cause electrons to flow from the iron to the copper through the acidic solution, generating a small but measurable electrical potential of about 1 to 2 volts. It's the exact same electrochemical principle that powers a modern battery. While a single jar wouldn't produce much power, connecting several of them together in a series, what we would call a battery today, could have provided a significant and sustained electrical current. So, what would an ancient civilization possibly do with electricity 2,000 years ago? The hypotheses are as intriguing as the object itself. One compelling idea involves electroplating. Artisans could have used the current from these cells to transfer a thin layer of gold or silver onto the surface of other metals, creating beautiful gilded objects. This would explain the existence of exceptionally fine, microscopically thin gold coatings on some artifacts from the same era and region, work that was previously thought to be impossible without some form of electrical assistance. Another, more speculative theory suggests a medical or religious application. The mild electric shock produced could have been used in acupuncture-like therapies or to create a tingling sensation during religious ceremonies, perhaps to convince worshippers of a deity's tangible power. The experience of a mysterious, invisible force emanating from a sacred object would have been a profound tool for any priestly class, of course. This interpretation is met with significant skepticism from mainstream archaeology. The primary counter-argument is that no wires or conductors have ever been found with these jars, and there is no definitive depiction or written record from the period that explains their use as batteries. Many scholars maintain that these were simply secure storage vessels for important religious or magical scrolls, made of perishable materials like papyrus or parchment. The asphalt seal would have kept out moisture and protected the contents, with the iron rod merely acting as a handy spool around which a scroll was rolled. This is a perfectly logical and far more conservative explanation. Yet the question remains, why go through the elaborate and metallurgically precise process of using two different, carefully isolated metals if the goal was only to store a scroll? A simple wooden rod would have sufficed. The very design of the object seems unnecessarily complex for a simple storage jar, but perfectly suited for an electrochemical reaction. The Baghdad battery exists in this fascinating space between proven fact and tantalizing possibility. Even modern experiments have shown that replicas based on the original design do, in fact, produce electricity. Whether it was truly used for this purpose may never be known for certain, but its existence forces us to consider that the spark of electrical discovery may not have been kindled by Benjamin Franklin or Alessandro Volta, but may have flickered, however briefly, in the workshops of ancient Iraq 2 millennia ago. Now, let's shift our focus from the ancient workshops of Iraq to a seemingly ordinary day in the mountains of California, where a discovery was made that would become one of the most fiercely debated puzzles in the world of out-of-place artifacts. In February 1961, a group of rockhounds were searching for geodes near the town of Olancha in the Coso Mountains. For Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mikesell, it was just another day of prospecting. They collected several promising rocks, and later, while cutting one open back at their shop, Mikesell reportedly ruined a brand new diamond-edged saw blade. The problem wasn't the rock's hardness, but what was inside. Instead of the beautiful crystal cavity typical of a geode, they found a perfectly circular section of white ceramic material surrounding a 2mm metal rod, all encased within a hardened shell of clay, pebbles, and what appeared to be fossilized material. Running through the center was a thin shaft of a bright, corrosion-resistant metal. To the discoverers, it looked unmistakably like a modern spark plug. This is where the mystery deepens to an almost unbelievable degree. The object wasn't just lying in the dirt, it was found completely encased within a concretion, a hard, rock-like nodule that forms around a core object over immense periods of time through a natural cementation process. The formation around the so-called Coso artifact was identified as a geode, which typically takes hundreds of thousands of years to develop. One initial geological analysis even suggested the nodule could be around 500,000 years old. If that dating were accurate, it would place this spark plug-like object firmly in the Pleistocene epoch, a time when early humans were just beginning to use the most primitive stone tools. The idea of a manufactured, metallic object existing in such an ancient context is, from a conventional historical perspective, an absolute impossibility. Naturally, such a claim has attracted intense scrutiny and a wide range of theories attempting to explain it. The most accepted and mainstream explanation is that the artifact is exactly what it appears to be, a spark plug from the early 20th century. The area where it was found is known to have had mining operations, ranching, and early automotive traffic. Skeptics propose that a spark plug from an old truck or piece of mining equipment could have been lost and, through a rare and accelerated geological process, become encrusted with minerals relatively quickly. Some have even identified it as a champion spark plug model from the 1920s, a type that featured a ceramic insulator and a magnetic metal alloy, which would match the description of the Coso object. However, those who support the artifact's anomalous nature counter that the specific type of concretion it was found in does not form in mere decades. They point to the reported fossilized shells and animal remains within the matrix surrounding the object as evidence of its genuine antiquity. This has fueled more speculative yet captivating theories. Could it be a remnant of an advanced prehistoric human civilization like the mythical Atlantis, whose technological achievements were completely lost to time? Or does it point to something even more extraordinary, such as ancient astronauts or time travelers, visitors from another world or another era, who left behind this solitary mechanical clue? The very existence of the object, regardless of its origin, challenges our linear understanding of technological progress. The true nature of the Coso artifact remains shrouded in uncertainty, largely because the object itself has been missing for decades, locked away in a private collection and unavailable for modern scientific testing. Without the ability to subject it to contemporary analysis like X-ray fluorescence or advanced dating techniques, the mystery persists. It stands as a powerful symbol of the limits of our knowledge, a single, perplexing data point that refuses to fit neatly into any timeline. Whether a misdated modern object or something infinitely stranger, the Koso artifact forces us to confront the uncomfortable fact that the past may hold secrets we are only just beginning to uncover. But sometimes the most baffling artifacts are not discovered in distant, exotic locations, but much closer to home, hidden in plain sight within the very bedrock of our planet. This brings us to the strange case of the London Hammer, an object that seems to defy the most fundamental principles of geology and human history. The story begins in June 1936, near the town of London, Texas, when a local couple, Mr. and Mrs. Han, were walking along a creek. They noticed a peculiar piece of rock with a piece of wood protruding from it. Curiosity led them to take the rock home, and years later, in the 1980s, their son cracked it open to reveal what was inside. A hammer with a complete wooden handle and a solid iron head perfectly encased within the stone. The immediate and obvious problem is the age of the rock itself. The concretion that entombed the hammer was identified as Cretaceous rock, a formation from the era of the dinosaurs, dating back to a staggering 100 to 140 million years ago. From a conventional scientific standpoint, this is an impossibility of cataclysmic proportions. Modern humans, capable of forging iron and crafting tools with wooden handles, have only existed for a fraction of that time. The hammer simply should not be there. Adding to the mystery is the condition of the hammerhead. Analysis has shown the iron to be of a remarkably pure quality, with a very low sulfur content, and it shows almost no sign of rust or corrosion even after all this time. This kind of metallurgical purity is unusual for historical ironwork and contributes to its enduring, almost pristine state. This artifact quickly became a celebrated icon within creationist circles, who point to it as tangible, physical proof that the standard geological timescale is fundamentally flawed. Their interpretation is straightforward. If a man-made hammer is found in rock dated to the age of dinosaurs, then humans and dinosaurs must have coexisted, and the Earth must be far younger than mainstream science claims. For them, the London Hammer is not an anomaly. It is evidence, a relic from a pre-flood world that aligns with a literal interpretation of biblical history. It serves as a powerful symbol in the ongoing debate between evolution and creationism, a concrete object held up to question millions of years of established Earth history. Mainstream geologists and archaeologists, however, offer a very different and more nuanced explanation. They propose that the hammer is not nearly as ancient as the rock it was found in suggests. Instead, they point to a well-documented natural process involving limestone, which is soluble in water. The theory is that a relatively modern hammer, perhaps from a 19th century miner or settler, was lost or discarded near the creek. Over time, acidic groundwater could have dissolved the surrounding limestone. As the water evaporated or its chemistry changed, the dissolved minerals would have reprecipitated, forming a hard, rock-like concretion around the hammer. This process, known as concretion formation, can happen over decades or centuries, not millions of years, and can encase objects in a way that makes them appear far older than they truly are. The unique chemical environment could also account for the unusual purity and preservation of the iron, as the specific mineral content in the water might have inhibited the normal rusting process. So we are left with two irreconcilable narratives. One sees the hammer as a revolutionary discovery that overturns modern science, while the other views it as a fascinating but ultimately mundane example of a natural geological phenomenon, misinterpreting a recent human artifact. The hammer itself is now housed in the Creation Evidence Museum, a testament to its enduring power as a symbol. The debate over the London Hammer ultimately centers on the interpretation of context. Is the rock the true context for the hammer's age, or is the hammer the true context for understanding how the rock formed? It forces us to confront how we date objects, how we interpret evidence, and where we draw the line between a world-altering anomaly and a simple case of geological curiosity. It remains a focal point for a much larger conversation about the very nature of scientific inquiry and historical belief. Leaving the contentious debate of the London hammer behind, we journey next to the sands of Saqqara, Egypt, a vast necropolis that has yielded countless treasures. It was here in 1898, during the excavation of the tomb of Pa-Dir-Men, that archaeologists uncovered a small, unassuming object carved from sycamore wood. Dated to approximately 200 BC, this artifact was catalogued simply as a bird figurine and stored away in the Cairo Museum's basement, where it remained for decades, just one among many such finds. But this was no ordinary bird. When it was finally studied more carefully in the 20th century, researchers noticed something profoundly unusual about its design. This object, now known as the Saqqara bird, possesses features that seem to defy its classification as a simple toy or religious offering, features that point instead to a startlingly advanced understanding of aerodynamics. At first glance, you might indeed mistake it for a stylized bird. It has a clear beak and eyes, and it's carved in a way that suggests a falcon, a bird of great spiritual significance to the ancient Egyptians. But a closer inspection reveals critical deviations from any known avian anatomy. The wings are perfectly straight, level, and aerodynamically shaped, unlike the curved, feathered wings of a real bird. Even more telling is the tail. Instead of a bird's horizontal fan tail, the Saqqara bird has a vertical, fin-like tailplane, a feature that no bird in nature possesses. This vertical tail is a quintessential component of modern aircraft design, essential for stability in flight. It prevents an aircraft from yawing or swinging side to side, much like the fin on the underside of a boat keeps it from tipping over. This single feature transforms the object from a simple bird carving into something that looks uncannily like a monoplane glider or an early model airplane, minus only the propeller. The mystery truly took flight when Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptologist and model plane enthusiast, publicly proposed in the 1970s that the Saqqara bird was in fact a scale model of a working glider. His brother, a flight engineer, constructed a balsa wood replica based on the artifact's precise dimensions. When tested, this model didn't just fall to the ground, it flew. It demonstrated stable gliding capabilities, capable of covering impressive distances when launched with a little thrust. This simple experiment proved that the object's design was not merely decorative, it was functionally sound. The proportions of its wings to its body, the angle of its wings, and that crucial vertical tail all worked together to generate lift and provide stability, principles of flight that were not formally understood until the work of figures like Sir George Cayley in the 19th century and the Wright brothers in the 20th. This revelation, of course, opens the door to a host of speculative and fascinating theories. Could the ancient Egyptians have possessed a lost knowledge of aviation? Some researchers suggest the artifact might be a model of a much larger manned glider, perhaps used for ceremonial purposes or even as a prototype for a working aircraft. Proponents of this view often point to other enigmatic reliefs in Egyptian temples that some interpret as depicting helicopters or other advanced flying machines, though mainstream Egyptologists dismiss these as misinterpretations of overlapping hieroglyphs. The more radical and much more controversial theory connects the bird to the legend of the Egyptian air god, and even further to the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Could this object be a representation of technology witnessed from a more advanced, perhaps extraterrestrial, civilization? It's a theory that exists far outside the boundaries of conventional archaeology, but it speaks to the profound sense of mystery the object inspires. Naturally, the mainstream academic community offers more grounded and perhaps more likely explanations. The predominant theory is that the Saqqara bird was indeed a ceremonial object or a child's toy, and its aerodynamic properties are merely a coincidence, a happy accident of a craftsman's design. It could have been a weather vane mounted on a sacred boat used in processions, with a vertical tail allowing it to always point into the wind. Others propose it was simply a stylized bird, and that we are guilty of pareidolia, seeing a familiar pattern, in this case an airplane, in a random or unrelated object. They argue that without any corroborating evidence, no blueprints, no larger wreckage, no written records describing flight, it is a massive leap to conclude the Egyptians had developed aviation. The absence of any other similar, more complex models is a significant point against the advanced technology theory. So, we are left with a beautifully crafted wooden object that sits at the crossroads of art, archaeology, and aeronautical engineering. Is it a toy, a religious symbol, or a scale model of a forgotten technology? The experiments show it can fly, which means its design is objectively airworthy. This fact alone elevates it beyond most other ancient artifacts. Whether it was ever intended to be more than a curiosity, whether it represents a fleeting spark of genius from a single, unknown Egyptian inventor, or simply a lucky guess, remains one of Egyptology's most captivating puzzles. The Saqqara bird doesn't just represent a bird, it represents an idea, a possibility of flight that soared in the ancient world, only to be buried in the sand for 2,000 years, waiting for a modern age to recognize its extraordinary potential. From the sun-scorched deserts of Egypt, we now venture deep into the mist-shrouded mountains of China, to a story so strange and so shrouded in controversy that it straddles the line between archaeological mystery and outright science fiction. This is the enigmatic and hotly debated tale of the Dropa stones. The story begins in 1938, when a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te is said to have been leading an expedition into the remote Bayan Karaula Mountains near the border of Tibet. There, they allegedly discovered a series of carefully arranged burial caves. Inside, the team made a bizarre find: the skeletons of a number of unusually small, fragile beings with disproportionately large skulls. At first, they speculated they had found the remains of an unknown species of mountain ape, but that theory quickly collapsed when they realized the caves showed clear signs of intelligent habitation. Scattered across the cave floor near these strange skeletons were hundreds of stone discs, each about 9 inches in diameter and with a perfect hole in the center, making them look almost like primitive gramophone records. These were the Dropa stones. According to the legend, the stones themselves were estimated to be around 12,000 years old, a truly staggering age. But their real mystery was not their form but their content. Each disc was said to be inscribed with a continuous, tiny spiral groove that, upon closer inspection under a magnifying glass, was not a groove at all, but a line of minuscule, unknown hieroglyphic characters. This was, by any account, a seemingly impossible feat of micro-engraving for a prehistoric culture. The story grows even more extraordinary from here. A professor in Beijing named Tsum Nui is said to have devoted years to deciphering the script in the 1960s. He reportedly claimed that the inscriptions told a harrowing and tragic story. It described a spacecraft from a distant world that crash-landed in the mountains. The occupants, a people who called themselves the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and found themselves stranded on Earth. They sought to communicate with the local Ham tribes who inhabited the region, but were initially met with fear and hostility. Over time, they were hunted and killed, their story literally carved into these stones as a permanent record of their demise. If true, this would be the most profound archaeological discovery in human history, direct physical evidence of an extraterrestrial visitation in our planet's deep past. Adding another layer to the mystery were claims about the stone's physical composition. When analyzed, the discs were supposedly found to contain high levels of cobalt and other metallic elements. Even more bizarrely, some accounts suggest that when scientists placed the discs on a special turntable, they allegedly vibrated or hummed with a strange rhythmic frequency, as if they held an electrical charge or some form of stored energy. These properties, combined with the incredible narrative, painted a picture of an artifact that was not merely a record, but a sophisticated data storage device of unearthly origin. However, the entire edifice of this incredible story is built on a foundation of sand. The Dropa stones have become the holy grail of out-of-place artifacts precisely because they have vanished. No reputable museum in the world holds them. No photographs of the inscriptions have ever been conclusively verified. The very existence of the principal figures in the story, Kai Pu Te and Tsumam Nui, is unconfirmed in mainstream archaeological records. The entire narrative seems to have first appeared in a German magazine and was then popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken, becoming a cornerstone of the ancient astronaut theory despite a complete lack of verifiable evidence. For these reasons, the scientific community has almost universally dismissed the Dropa stones as an elaborate hoax or a classic piece of pseudo-history. Skeptics offer a much more down-to-earth explanation for the origin of the tale. They point out that stone discs with holes in the center are real artifacts known as Bai discs, which have been found in China for thousands of years. These Bai discs, however, are ceremonial jade objects associated with wealth and power in ancient Chinese cultures, and they do not feature any microscopic writing. The theory is that the entire Dropa story was fabricated around a real but misunderstood class of artifacts, weaving a science fiction narrative onto a mundane archaeological find. The claims of strange vibrations and cobalt content are seen as later embellishments added to make the story more compelling and scientifically plausible. The story's enduring power lies not in its truth, but in its potent appeal to our imagination. It touches on our deepest questions about whether we are alone in the universe and whether our past might be far more dramatic than we ever supposed. The Dropa stones, whether a hoax or a lost truth, remain a powerful cultural icon, a ghost story for the space age that continues to captivate and mystify, proving that sometimes the most persistent mysteries are not about what we have found, but about the stories we desperately want to believe. Now we move from disputed relics to a document that is very real, meticulously crafted, and hangs today in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul as a testament to one of history's greatest cartographic puzzles. Created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this map, known as the Piri Reis map, is a stunningly beautiful and accurate portolan chart of the Atlantic Ocean and its surrounding lands. It shows the coastlines of Western Africa, Eastern South America, and most controversially, a landmass at the bottom of the world that bears a shocking resemblance to the continent of Antarctica. This would be remarkable on its own, but the map possesses a detail that catapults it into the realm of the impossible. It appears to show Antarctica's coastline not as it is today, buried under miles of ice, but as it would look if it were a barren, ice-free land. The map's own annotations are the key to this enigma. Piri Reis openly wrote that he was not the original source of this geographic knowledge. He compiled his work from about 20 source maps and charts, some of which he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, drawn from the legendary Library of Alexandria. This single footnote suggests that the map is not a product of 16th century exploration, but a medieval copy of a far more ancient document, preserving a snapshot of the world from a time when Antarctica was free of ice, a condition that mainstream science tells us last existed millions of years ago. The implications of this are staggering. If the map is genuinely depicting Antarctica, it means that a sophisticated, seafaring civilization with advanced knowledge of spherical trigonometry and cartography must have existed in the deep past, long before the rise of any known culture. They would have needed to map a coastline that has been completely inaccessible to modern humans since the last ice age began. This has led to compelling, if controversial, theories. The most prominent, championed by historians like Charles Hapgood in the 1960s, posits the existence of a prehistoric civilization, perhaps the source of the Atlantis myth, which achieved a global level of exploration. Their maps, according to this theory, were preserved in great libraries like Alexandria's and were copied and recopied over centuries, their origins forgotten, until fragments of this ancient knowledge found their way into the hands of a Turkish admiral. The Piri Reis map, then, is not an original work of genius but a priceless palimpsest, a ghost image of a lost world's geography. Of course, such an extraordinary claim has been met with intense and methodical skepticism from the mainstream academic community. The primary and most widely accepted counter-argument is that the mysterious landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a distorted, composite representation of the southern coastline of South America. 16th-century cartographers were often working from incomplete and second-hand sailor reports, and it was common to guess at the contours of unknown lands or to attach a speculative terra australis incognita to the bottom of their maps. Skeptics argue that the section identified as Antarctica is simply the Patagonian coast, drawn with significant errors and connected to a mythical great southern continent. They point out that the map lacks the most defining feature of Antarctica, the transantarctic mountain range, and that its overall shape is a poor match for the actual subglacial topography when compared to modern seismic surveys. The apparent accuracy, they suggest, is a classic case of confirmation bias, where we selectively focus on the parts that seem to match while ignoring the vast areas that do not. Yet, the debate is far from settled. Proponents of the map's anomalous nature counter that the fit of the Piri Reis coastline to the actual subglacial continent is simply too close to be dismissed as mere coincidence. They highlight specific geographical features, such as the projection of the Pommer Peninsula and the indentations of the Weddell and Ross Seas, which seem to align more closely with the land beneath the ice than with the jagged coast of South America. The question then becomes not just one of cartography, but of geology. Could a pre-glacial civilization have existed within the time frame of human history? Mainstream science resoundingly says no, as the Antarctic ice sheet is estimated to be millions of years old. This forces a difficult choice: either accept that the map is a brilliant but flawed product of its time, or radically reconsider the timeline of both human civilization and the stability of the Antarctic ice cap. The Piri Reis map endures as a cornerstone of alternative history precisely because it presents a concrete, physical object that invites us to question everything we think we know about our past. It is a tantalizing piece of evidence that sits at the heart of a centuries-old mystery, a beautiful and cryptic invitation to wonder what other knowledge might have been lost to the fires of time. Our journey into artifacts that defy explanation now takes us to the dusty foothills of the Peruvian Andes, where a collection of stones has ignited one of the most contentious debates in all of alternative archaeology. These are the Ica stones, thousands of andesite river rocks that range from the size of a fist to boulders weighing hundreds of pounds. What makes them extraordinary are the intricate carvings that cover their surfaces. But these are not typical ancient designs depicting gods or daily life. Instead, they show scenes that are, by all accounts, historically impossible. There are human figures locked in combat with, or even riding upon, creatures that look unmistakably like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and pterodactyls. Other stones depict what appear to be advanced technological and medical knowledge, surgeons performing complex operations like heart transplants and cesarean sections, astronomers using telescopes to observe comets, and even maps of the ancient world that show lost continents. The central figure in this mystery was a local physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquia. Beginning in the 1960s, he began collecting these stones from a single source, a farmer named Basilio Ashuya. Dr. Cabrera eventually amassed a collection of over 15,000 stones, which he housed in his own private museum. He became their most ardent proponent, developing a grand and revolutionary theory to explain them. He argued that the stones were a vast prehistoric library, created by an ancient, technologically advanced civilization he called the Glyptolithic man. This race, he claimed, coexisted with dinosaurs and possessed medical and scientific knowledge that rivaled or even surpassed our own. He believed they were the true first humans and that these carvings were their intended legacy, a permanent record of their achievements meant to survive global cataclysms that wiped them from the earth. For Cabrera, the Ica stones were nothing less than a rewritten history of humanity, proving that our timeline was profoundly wrong. The controversy, however, reached a fever pitch when the very source of the stones was put under scrutiny. In the early 1970s, after authorities began an investigation into the illegal sale of archaeological artifacts, the farmer Basilio Ashuya confessed. He admitted that he and his wife, and likely other local farmers, were the true artists behind the carvings. He demonstrated his technique, showing how he used a simple dental drill to etch the designs into the rocks, and then aged them by baking them in donkey dung to create a dark, weathered patina. He explained that he forged the stones specifically to sell to tourists, inspired by popular comic books, dinosaur illustrations, and textbooks that depicted ancient life and modern medicine. This confession was a devastating blow to the credibility of the entire collection, and for most mainstream archaeologists it closed the case. The Ica stones were declared an elaborate, lucrative hoax. But the story doesn't end there. Despite this seemingly definitive confession, a stubborn debate has persisted for decades. Dr. Cabrera and his supporters refused to accept that all the stones were fakes. They pointed to several perplexing anomalies that the hoax explanation couldn't easily dismiss. First was the sheer volume and consistency of the collection. Could a few uneducated farmers, even over many years, have produced over 15,000 intricately carved stones, many with a complex and internally consistent artistic style and a seemingly planned narrative sequence? Second, and more compelling, was the physical condition of the stones themselves. Geologists who examined them noted that the dark patina, or desert varnish, covering the carvings appeared to be genuinely ancient, suggesting the engravings were made long before the modern tools used in the confessed forgery. This patina forms over centuries through a complex chemical process involving bacteria and mineral deposition, a phenomenon that would be incredibly difficult to replicate convincingly with donkey dung in a matter of years. This has led to a fascinating and more nuanced theory that attempts to reconcile the confession with the puzzling evidence. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's possible that a small number of genuine, ancient carved stones were discovered by local farmers. These authentic artifacts, which may have depicted stylized animals that only coincidentally resembled dinosaurs, inspired the locals to create their own versions. The farmers, seeing the interest and financial potential, then mass-produced forgeries based on these few real relics, but embellished them with dramatic and anachronistic scenes drawn from modern sources to make them more sensational and valuable. This would explain Basilio Ashuya's confession. He was indeed responsible for creating and selling the stones, while leaving the door open for a core of genuine and truly mysterious artifacts that started the entire phenomenon. The Ica stones, therefore, exist in a liminal space between outright fraud and potential historical revelation. They force us to ask a difficult question: how do we separate truth from fiction when a known hoax is built upon a possible foundation of fact? They remain a powerful cultural touchstone, a testament to our enduring fascination with the idea of lost worlds and the tantalizing possibility that our deep past holds secrets far stranger than we have yet been willing to accept. But what happens when a discovery is so small it can sit on your fingertip, yet so significant it can reshape our understanding of an entire continent? This is the paradox of the main penny, an artifact that proves sometimes the most powerful historical statements come in the most unassuming packages. The story begins not with a grand archaeological dig, but with a systematic, professional excavation at the Goddard site, a large prehistoric Native American settlement on the coast of Maine. From 1971 to 1976, A team led by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the Maine State Museum meticulously sifted through layers of soil, uncovering over 20,000 artifacts. This was no treasure hunt. It was a scientific endeavor to understand the lives of the native people who thrived there between the 12th and 15th centuries. The vast majority of the finds were exactly what you would expect: stone tools, pottery shards, and bone fragments. But in 1972, as volunteer excavators were painstakingly sorting through material from a soil screen, something entirely unexpected flickered amidst the dark earth. It was a small silver coin. Initially, it didn't look like much. It was identified as a common English coin from the 12th century and largely forgotten for a few years. But when it was finally sent to experts for proper identification, the truth was far more astonishing. This was no English penny. Specialists at the University of Oslo and the British Museum identified it as a Norwegian silver penny, specifically from the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, who ruled from 1067 to 1093 AD. This was a Norse coin minted in Norway over 1,000 years ago. On one side, it bears a crude portrait of a king with a scepter and the legend Olaf Rex, while the other shows a stylized cross, a common design for the period. Its condition suggested it had seen some circulation, but it was unmistakably genuine. Here was a coin from medieval Scandinavia, found not in a European context, but securely nestled in a layer of soil among the tools and refuse of a Native American village that dated to a century before Columbus set sail. The implications of this tiny silver disc are monumental. We know, of course, about the Norse settlement at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland, a site that conclusively proves Vikings reached North America around the year 1000. But that site is over 1,000 miles away from the coast of Maine. The discovery of the Maine penny immediately suggests that Norse exploration or contact did not stop at the northern tip of Newfoundland. It opens up the tantalizing possibility of more extensive travel down the North American coast, potentially as far south as New England. The most logical explanation is trade. Perhaps a Norse ship, whether a planned exploration vessel or one blown off course, made contact with the native people at the Goddard site, a location known to have been a major trade hub for indigenous groups. The Norse traveler might have offered the coin in exchange for food, furs, or safe passage. To the native person who received it, the coin likely held no monetary value. It was probably valued for its intrinsic beauty as a shiny, unusual object, perhaps pierced to be worn as a pendant or simply kept as a curiosity before being lost to the earth for 800 years. However, such a profound claim is met with equally profound skepticism from many in the archaeological community. The primary and most persistent counter-argument is the possibility of modern contamination. The Goddard site was not an untouched wilderness. It was located on a private farm, and the area had been inhabited and farmed for generations. Skeptics suggest the coin could have been dropped by a much later collector of ancient coins, perhaps in the 19th or early 20th century, and through natural processes like plowing or animal burrowing, it became mixed in with the much older Native American layers. This is a well-known phenomenon in archaeology, where a recent object can sink into an older stratum, creating a false association. The fact that only a single Norse artifact was found among 20,000 native ones is often cited as evidence for this theory. If there had been sustained trade or contact, wouldn't we expect to find more? A single broken Norse tool, a piece of ship's rivet, or at least more than one lonely coin? The debate over the Maine penny perfectly encapsulates the challenges of interpreting a solitary, anomalous find. Proponents of its authenticity as evidence of pre-Columbian contact point to the professional nature of the excavation. The coin was found in a controlled, scientific dig, not by amateurs with metal detectors. It was recovered from a well-defined layer of soil that also contained abundant, datable Native American artifacts, providing a strong contextual argument for its antiquity at the site. They argue that the absence of other Norse objects is not definitive proof against contact. A single, brief encounter could easily result in only one or two items entering the archaeological record. The coin is a durable object, while things like cloth, wood, or food offered by the Native Americans would have long since decayed. The debate often hinges not on the coin itself. Its authenticity as a medieval Norwegian penny is not in question, but on the integrity of the soil layer it was found in. Did it arrive there in the 12th century or in the 19th? Ultimately, the main penny refuses to offer a simple answer. It is a genuine Norse artifact in a genuine pre-Columbian context, and yet it stands alone. It is either one of the most important pieces of evidence for Norse exploration in North America, or it is a brilliant red herring, a modern intrusion that has fooled us into seeing connections that never were. It represents the razor's edge of historical interpretation, where a single data point can support two completely different narratives. This tiny piece of silver is a powerful reminder that history is not always written in grand monuments and epic sagas. Sometimes it is whispered by a single coin, lost in the dirt, waiting for us to decide what story it truly tells. And now we move from a single, disputed coin to a massive, 200-pound slab of stone that carries an entire story etched into its face. A story that, if true, would dramatically rewrite the timeline of European exploration in the heart of North America. This is the Kensington runestone, a granite monolith covered in runic letters that was discovered in 1898, not on a windswept coast but deep in the forests of Minnesota by a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman. According to his account, he found the stone tangled in the roots of a poplar tree while clearing his land. The tree itself was estimated to be around 40 years old, suggesting the stone had been there long before Oman ever arrived, buried and waiting. When he and his neighbors cleaned it off, they were confronted with an inscription in a language none of them could read. It was only after it was translated that the true bombshell was revealed. The inscription, carved in a form of Old Norse using runes, tells a harrowing tale of survival and tragedy. It reads in part, 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland far to the west. We had camped by 2 skerries 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out fishing one day. When we came home, we found 10 men red with blood and dead. A VM Ave Maria, save us from evil. It ends with a chilling postscript. We have 10 men by the sea to look after our ships 14 days' journey from this island. Year 1362. This single date is what makes the stone so revolutionary. It claims that a group of Norse explorers, a mixed party of Swedes and Norwegians, were venturing deep into the American interior a full 130 years after the Vikings at Elant's Ox Meadows and a century before Columbus was even born. They weren't just coastal visitors. They had traveled 14 days inland from their ships, placing them squarely in the middle of the continent, where they met a brutal and mysterious end. For decades, this story has been at the center of a fierce and deeply personal academic war. On one side stands the overwhelming consensus of linguists, runologists, and archaeologists from major institutions who have declared the stone a clever and sentimental hoax. Their evidence is extensive and, to many, compelling. They point to numerous linguistic anachronisms, arguing that the specific runes and the grammatical structure used on the stone are a jumbled mix from different time periods and regions, not the consistent language a group of 14th century Norsemen would have used. Some of the runes are considered to be modern inventions, unknown in any medieval Scandinavian context. Furthermore, analysis of the carving itself suggests it was done with modern tools, showing chisel marks that are too clean and sharp, lacking the weathering one would expect from 500 years of exposure to the Minnesota elements. The primary theory from this camp is that Olof Oman, a literate and well-read man, along with possibly his friend, a Swedish minister, created the stone to play a prank to foster local pride, or to cement the legacy of Scandinavian immigrants in their new homeland by giving them a deep, heroic history in America. Yet, on the other side of the debate is a passionate and dedicated group of local historians, Scandinavian American community members, and a handful of renegade scholars who believe the stone is genuine. They argue that the academic establishment has been unfairly biased from the start, dismissing the stone out of hand because it contradicted the established historical narrative centered on Columbus. Proponents of its authenticity have conducted their own investigations, pointing to the physical evidence of the find. The stone was found entwined in the roots of a tree that was decades old, making it highly unlikely that Oman could have planted it there himself as part of a hoax. They also highlight geological studies of the weathering on the inscription, which some argue shows signs of being centuries old, not a few years. These supporters propose an alternative history, that a late Norse expedition, perhaps sailing from the dying Greenland settlements in a final, desperate search for resources or new land, ventured down the Hudson Bay and into the Great Lakes region via river systems, leaving this runestone as a grim memorial to their fate. This divide between academic consensus and local belief makes the Kensington runestone more than just an archaeological puzzle. It is a cultural touchstone. For the Scandinavian communities of the Midwest, the stone is a point of immense pride, a tangible link to their heritage that proves their ancestors were not just immigrants, but rediscoverers of a land their forebears had reached long ago. It is celebrated in museums, festivals, and even replicated in a massive monument in the town of Alexandria, Minnesota. The emotional investment in the stone's authenticity is powerful, creating a narrative that resonates deeply with identity and a sense of belonging. The debate, therefore, is not merely about runes and chisel marks. It is about who gets to write history and whose stories are deemed valid. The Kensington runestone stands as a permanent question mark, a heavy, granite challenge to the history books, reminding us that the past is often as much about what we choose to believe as it is about what we can definitively prove. If you thought ancient maps and carved stones were perplexing, prepare to encounter a mystery that has consumed the world's greatest codebreakers for over a century, a book that laughs in the face of comprehension. Tucked away in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University is a small 240-page volume known as the Voynich manuscript. From the moment you see it, you know it's different. Its vellum pages are filled from edge to edge with a flowing, unknown script, a cipher that has never been cracked, accompanied by illustrations that are both beautiful and deeply unsettling. You see delicate, unknown plants with roots that look like animal organs, intricate astronomical diagrams featuring unknown constellations, and page after page of what can only be described as naked women bathing in interconnected, vibrant green tubs, their bodies connected by what seem to be elaborate plumbing systems. It is a surreal and captivating visual experience, a window into a mind or a culture that we cannot access. The history of the book is as enigmatic as its contents. It first appears in the historical record in the late 16th century, when it was purchased by Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II of Prague for 600 gold ducats, a king's ransom. It passed through the hands of alchemists and scholars for centuries before disappearing, only to be rediscovered in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich, from whom it gets its name. For decades, speculation ran wild about its age and origin. Was it a medieval creation or something more recent? That question was finally answered by modern science. In 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona performed radiocarbon dating on the vellum pages. The results were definitive. The book was created between 1404 and 1438. This places it firmly in the early Renaissance, a time of burgeoning knowledge and exploration, yet the manuscript feels utterly alien to that period. This confirmed age has only intensified the central, maddening mystery. What does it say? The text is composed in a unique alphabet of between 20 and 30 characters, written with a fluency and consistency that suggests it is a real language or a complex cipher, not random gibberish. There are no corrections, no hesitations in the script. The author knew exactly what they were writing, and this is not just any unsolved code. This is the Mount Everest of cryptography. It has resisted the efforts of the most brilliant minds in the field, including top codebreakers from both World War I and World War II, like William Friedman, who helped break the Japanese purple cipher. Teams of computer scientists and linguists have applied the most powerful artificial intelligence and statistical analysis, searching for patterns that would reveal its secrets. The text has structure. It follows linguistic rules with words that repeat and sentence-like constructions, but it corresponds to no known language on Earth. It is, for all intents and purposes, a linguistic ghost. This profound failure has naturally given rise to a spectacular range of theories attempting to explain the manuscript's purpose and origin. The most skeptical view is that it is an elaborate and brilliant hoax crafted to fool a wealthy patron like Emperor Rudolph. A clever forger could have created a meaningless but grammatical-looking script to accompany bizarre drawings, selling it as a priceless book of secrets. The problem with this theory is the immense, painstaking effort required. Creating over 200 pages of consistent fake text on expensive vellum would have been a monumental task for a simple fraud with no guarantee of a payoff. Another prominent idea is that it is an encoded herbal and scientific text, written in a cipher so complex that the key has been lost to time. Perhaps it contains genuine, sensitive knowledge that its author needed to protect from the church or rivals, rendering it a locked library of early Renaissance science. But the theories get even more fascinating. Some linguists propose it is written in a constructed language, an early artificial tongue created before the author had developed a full understanding of linguistics, which would explain why it feels structured yet remains untranslatable. Others suggest it is the only surviving document from a small, lost culture, its language and world view completely isolated from the historical record. And then, of course, there is the most speculative possibility that the Voynich manuscript is not of this world. Its bizarre biological and astronomical imagery has led some to wonder if it could be a record of extraterrestrial knowledge given to a human contact or found from a crashed craft, its symbols representing concepts so alien that human brains cannot properly interpret them. While this is the least likely explanation from a scientific standpoint, it speaks to the sheer depth of the mystery. The Voynich manuscript is unique among out-of-place artifacts. It isn't a tool or a statue whose function we can guess at. It is a direct communication, a message screaming at us from the past in a language we are seemingly too primitive or perhaps too advanced to understand. It mocks our assumption that with enough effort we can decipher any historical text. It sits in its climate-controlled vault, a perfect enigma, reminding us that the past is not a foreign country, but an alien planet, and that some of its stories may remain forever untold, their secrets locked away in plain sight. While our previous artifacts were objects you could hold in your hand, our next enigma is so vast it can only be comprehended from the heavens. Etched into the arid, wind-swept plains of southern Peru, the Nazca lines are a breathtaking gallery of geoglyphs, massive drawings created by removing the dark, sun-baked surface pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored soil beneath. This desert canvas holds hundreds of figures, ranging from perfectly straight lines that run for miles across the landscape to intricate and beautiful depictions of animals, plants, and geometric shapes. You can find a colossal hummingbird, its wings poised in mid-beat, a sprawling spider with one leg elegantly extended, a massive monkey with a curiously spiraled tail, and even a humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut, who seems to be waving from a hillside. The sheer scale of these creations is what defines their mystery. From ground level, they appear as little more than shallow grooves or paths, but when viewed from the air, their true forms are revealed in stunning clarity. This fact has led to one of the most persistent questions in archaeology. Why would a people who had no means of flight create art that was meant to be seen from a perspective they could never physically achieve? Mainstream archaeology offers explanations rooted in the spiritual and practical world of the Nazca people, who created these lines between 500 BC and 500 AD. The leading theory suggests the lines were sacred pathways, walked during religious ceremonies to honor deities controlling water and fertility, precious resources in one of the driest places on Earth. The animal figures likely represented totemic spirits or constellations, and the act of walking these immense lines was a form of prayer, a way to connect with the divine forces of nature. Another compelling academic theory points to astronomy. Some of the longest and most prominent lines appear to align with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars during solstices and equinoxes. These alignments could have functioned as a giant celestial calendar, helping the Nazca culture track the seasons for planting and harvesting, and marking important dates for their rituals. The construction itself, while monumental, was well within their technological capabilities. Using simple tools and careful planning with stakes and cords, they could have scaled up small models into the gigantic designs we see today, creating art for their gods in the sky, even if they themselves could only envision the final, God's eye view. This logical and culturally grounded interpretation was radically challenged in the 1960s by Swiss author Erich von Däniken, whose book, Chariots of the Gods, catapulted the Nazca lines into the center of ancient astronaut theory. Von Däniken looked at the long, straight lines and wide, trapezoidal clearings and saw something entirely different. He proposed that these were not ritual pathways, but landing strips and directional markers for extraterrestrial spacecraft. In his view, the animal figures were not religious symbols, but signals or homing beacons meant to be seen from the air by ancient astronauts visiting Earth. Their astronaut figure on the hillside was, to him, literal evidence of these otherworldly visitors. This theory captured the global imagination, suggesting that human history was not a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but was instead punctuated by contact with a far more advanced interstellar civilization that our ancestors worshipped as gods. The debate between these two views has defined the public perception of the Nazca lines for decades. Proponents of the ancient astronaut hypothesis point to the enduring mystery of their construction and purpose, arguing that the astronomical and ritual explanations don't fully account for the risk and effort involved in creating such immense, invisible art. They ask why a culture would invest so much labor in art they could never properly appreciate, and suggest that witnessing spacecraft landing might have provided the necessary inspiration. Mainstream archaeologists and historians, however, have systematically dismantled this speculative theory. They counter that the so-called landing strips are often on soft, uneven ground that would be entirely unsuitable for any heavy vehicle, let alone an interstellar craft. Furthermore, the idea underestimates the ingenuity and spiritual devotion of the Nazca people themselves, reducing their incredible cultural achievement to a mere response to alien visitors. The lines, they argue, are a profound testament to human creativity and the universal desire to connect with the cosmos, a desire that needed no extraterrestrial intervention. The Nazca lines therefore stand as a powerful symbol of a different kind of historical mystery, not about what an artifact is, but about what it represents in the human story. They force us to choose between seeing our ancestors as resourceful, spiritually complex people creating magnificent earthworks for their own reasons, or as passive observers of wonders they could not comprehend, leaving behind messages for gods they believed came from the stars. Moving from the vast aerial art of the Nazca Plains, we find ourselves in the dense jungles and river deltas of Costa Rica, where another enigma lies scattered across the landscape, not as lines to be seen from above, but as perfect forms to be touched and wondered at from the ground. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, and their quiet, imposing presence has baffled explorers and archaeologists since they were first systematically encountered in the 1930s. The story of their modern discovery is tied to the United Fruit Company, which was clearing large tracts of jungle for banana plantations. As bulldozers pushed back the dense vegetation, workers began to uncover these incredible objects, smooth, almost perfectly round stone spheres, some sitting partially buried, others resting in clearings as if deliberately placed. Ranging in size from a few inches in diameter to colossal orbs over 6 feet across and weighing up to 16 tons, these spheres are a testament to a lost culture's obsession with geometric perfection. The creators of these mysterious objects are believed to be the Dikwis people, a pre-Columbian culture that flourished in the region from around 600 AD until the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. The spheres are most often found in the Dikwis Delta region, which gives the culture its name, and are frequently associated with the sites of chiefdoms areas that show evidence of complex social structures, plazas, and mounds. This contextual clue is vital, as it strongly suggests the spheres were not random artistic expressions, but held a deep and significant meaning for the society that crafted them. The material used is primarily granodiorite, a hard, igneous rock similar to granite, and the achievement of their near-perfect sphericity is what first captures the imagination. How did a culture without metal tools, without the wheel, and without sophisticated measuring devices manage to shape such resilient stone into forms that rival the precision of modern machinery? The process of their creation is a mystery in itself, one of patience and incredible skill. Archaeologists believe the Dikwis artisans began by finding large boulders of the correct material. They would then use a technique involving controlled heating and cooling, building fires against the stone, and then dousing it with water to create fractures and weaken the surface. Once the general shape was roughed out, the real work began, the meticulous hammering and pecking with tools made from other, equally hard stones. They would have painstakingly chipped away at the surface, slowly refining the shape over what was likely many generations for the largest spheres. The final polishing stage would have involved using sand or finer abrasives to achieve that remarkably smooth, almost glass-like finish. The true marvel, however, lies in the precision. Studies have shown that many of the spheres are so perfectly formed that their diameter varies by less than a centimeter from any point of measurement. This indicates an advanced, albeit non-technological, understanding of geometry and an unwavering commitment to an ideal form, a level of craftsmanship that seems almost superhuman in its patience and execution. But the how is only half the puzzle. The why is perhaps an even greater enigma. What purpose did these massive, labor-intensive orbs serve for the Dikwis culture? One of the leading theories is that they functioned as astronomical markers. Some spheres have been found arranged in alignments that correspond to celestial events, such as the rising and setting of the sun during solstices or the positions of significant stars. In this view, the spheres were a kind of permanent, physical calendar, their placements helping the society track the seasons for agriculture and schedule their important rituals. They transformed the landscape into a cosmic map, connecting the earthly realm of the chiefdom with the orderly movements of the heavens. Another compelling theory positions the spheres as powerful social and political symbols. Their immense size and the obvious labor required to create them would have made them potent displays of a chieftain's wealth, power, and authority. A larger, more perfectly formed sphere would signify control over a larger workforce and greater resources, serving as a permanent assertion of status. They might have been used to mark territorial boundaries, to line the pathways to a chief's residence, or to be arranged in plazas during important gatherings, physically embodying the social hierarchy and the power of the ruling elite. In this sense, they were not just stones, they were statements carved in granite. A more speculative yet deeply fascinating idea connects them to the Dikwis worldview. Some researchers suggest the spheres were physical representations of celestial bodies, not just markers, but actual models of the sun, the moon, or even the entire cosmos as they understood it. Their perfect, uniform shape could symbolize the ideal, harmonious order of the universe, a concept of cosmic balance that the Dickwys chiefs sought to emulate and control on Earth. This theory blends the astronomical and the social, proposing that the rulers used the spheres to legitimize their power by demonstrating a special connection to the divine patterns of the cosmos. Of course, the most popular and sensational theory, often promoted in alternative history circles, links the spheres to the legend of Atlantis or even extraterrestrial visitors, suggesting that such perfection could not have been achieved by human hands alone. While this captures the imagination, archaeologists point to the vast quantities of stone tools, unfinished spheres, and stone hammerheads found near the sites as undeniable proof of a human, earthbound origin. The mystery of the stone spheres is compounded by their displacement. Many of the spheres were moved from their original locations by the Banana Company in the 1930s and later by locals, who used them as decorative ornaments in government buildings, parks, and private yards. This unfortunate disturbance of their primary archaeological context has made it incredibly difficult for modern researchers to decipher their original arrangements and therefore their true purpose with any certainty. We are left with these magnificent silent orbs, their original voices silenced by time and disruption. They stand as a humbling reminder of a sophisticated culture whose motivations and beliefs we can only partially reconstruct, their greatest achievement being the creation of a beauty and a mystery so profound that it continues to captivate the world centuries after their civilization faded into history. Buried alongside the bones of a mastodon, a creature that vanished from the earth over 10,000 years ago, lies an artifact that presents a challenge as stark and metallic as its own composition. This is the Aod wedge, a shovel-shaped object whose very existence seems to violate the established timeline of human technological achievement. Discovered in 1974, just outside the city of Aod in Romania, the artifact was found under circumstances that defy simple explanation. Workers were excavating a sand pit on the banks of the Meuse River, digging down to a depth of 35 feet, when their shovels struck something hard amidst a layer of ancient fossilized mastodon bones. Alongside the remains of this prehistoric giant lay a heavy, wedge-shaped metal object covered in a thick, black layer of oxide. Initially, it was assumed to be an unusual stone axe or a primitive tool, perhaps used by early humans to hunt the massive beast it was buried with. But when researchers at the Archaeological Institute of Cluj-Napoca cleaned it and subjected it to analysis, the results sent shockwaves through the small community of researchers who study such anomalies. The object, weighing about 5 pounds, was found to be composed primarily of an alloy of aluminum, a metal comprising nearly 90% of its structure, along with 11 other elements including copper, zinc, and silicon. On the surface, this might not sound extraordinary. Aluminum is a common, lightweight metal used in everything from soda cans to aircraft, but the profound paradox of the Aod wedge lies in this very fact. While aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in its pure, metallic form in nature. It is always bound tightly with other elements in compounds like bauxite. To produce usable, metallic aluminum requires a highly sophisticated and energy-intensive industrial process called electrolysis, a technology that was not invented until the 1880s. For a piece of crafted aluminum alloy to be found in a layer of earth containing mastodon bones, which date to the Pleistocene epoch, is an absolute scientific impossibility. The official analysis from a laboratory in Lausanne, Switzerland, confirmed the alloy's composition and further deepened the mystery by dating the thick, encrusted layer on the artifact itself to be between 390 and 400 years old. However, this date only refers to the age of the patina, not the object beneath it, and critically, it was found in a geological layer that is vastly older, nestled among the remains of an animal that has been extinct for millennia. The immediate and most logical explanation offered by skeptics is that the wedge is a much more recent piece of industrial equipment. The most common theory posits that it is a tooth from the bucket of a modern excavator or dredger, perhaps from the 19th or early 20th century. Such teeth are often made of hardened steel, but some could be fabricated from aluminum alloys for specific lightweight applications. The idea is that this piece of machinery broke off during earlier, unrecorded digging or dredging operations in the sandy riverbank. Over time, through natural processes of sedimentation and flooding, it could have sunk deeper into the sand, eventually becoming mixed with the much older mastodon bones. This phenomenon, where a recent object descends into an older stratum, is known in archaeology as a depositional anomaly, and it is a perfectly plausible, if inconvenient, occurrence that can create the illusion of great age for a modern item. Yet, proponents of the artifact's anomalous nature point to several details that make the excavator tooth theory difficult to accept. The object's shape is not a perfect match for any known industrial digging tool. It has a distinctive, symmetrical wedge shape with a central, oval perforation, a design that doesn't correspond to the standard, asymmetrical, and pointed teeth used on heavy machinery. Furthermore, the argument about it sinking into the sand is met with the counter-argument of the reported 35-foot depth. For a heavy metal object to sink that far through compacted sand and gravel to become embedded so securely with fragile, ancient bones would require a specific and sustained set of geological conditions that some geologists find unlikely. The very context of its discovery, intimately associated with the mastodon, remains suggests a primary deposition, meaning it was buried at the same time as the bones rather than intruding later. If it is merely a lost piece of industrial equipment, then its placement is a 1,000,000-to-1 coincidence of almost unbelievable proportions. This leads to the more speculative yet captivating theories about the Ayod wedge's true origin. If it is genuinely ancient, then its existence implies a staggering revision of history. Could it be a relic from an advanced prehistoric human civilization, such as the fabled Atlantis, that possessed knowledge of metallurgy and engineering that was completely lost in some global cataclysm? The wedge's design, with its central hole, suggests it could have been part of a larger, more complex assembly. Some researchers have proposed it might be a foot or a support from a small vehicle or even a piece of aerial machinery, a notion that ties it thematically to other out-of-place artifacts like the Saqqara bird. The most radical theory, though it lacks any corroborating evidence, connects it to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, suggesting it could be a fragment of a visiting extraterrestrial spacecraft that crashed or was abandoned in Earth's distant past. While this idea exists far outside the bounds of conventional science, it speaks to the profound sense of mystery the object inspires, representing a technology that appears to be impossibly out of its time. The Ayod wedge remains one of the most contentious and physically tangible pieces of evidence in the world of anomalous artifacts. It is not a vague legend like the Dropa stones, but a solid, testable object with a published laboratory analysis. It currently resides in a private collection, largely unavailable for further, more advanced non-destructive testing, which has unfortunately stalled any potential resolution to the debate. This single piece of metal, therefore, becomes a Rorschach test for how one views history. For the skeptic, it is an inconveniently placed piece of modern junk, a puzzle whose solution is mundane. For the alternative historian, it is a profound clue, a metallic scream from a past that was far more complex and technologically sophisticated than our textbooks dare to admit. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable gaps in our understanding, standing as a silent, aluminum-alloyed challenge to the linear and orderly progression of human innovation we so confidently believe in. Deep within the coal mines of Wolfsegg, Austria in 1885, a discovery was made that would become a cornerstone of the out-of-place artifact mystery. Miners, breaking apart a large block of tertiary-era coal from a seam deep underground, found something utterly incongruous trapped inside. It wasn't a fossilized leaf or piece of petrified wood. It was a solid, heavy, cube-shaped object made of iron. This is the Wolfsegg iron, sometimes called the Salzburg cube, and its very presence in that ancient coal bed presents a riddle that has endured for nearly a century and a half. The coal in which it was found dates to the Miocene epoch, a period spanning from about 5 to 23 million years ago. This timeline places its formation long before the first humans ever walked the earth, and indeed before the evolution of any hominid capable of forging metal. How, then, did a meticulously shaped metal object come to be sealed inside a substance that predates humanity by millions of years? The object itself is surprisingly small, weighing just under 2 pounds and measuring roughly 2.5 inches by 2 inches, with a groove or indentation running around its center. Early analysis determined it was primarily composed of iron, but with a very peculiar characteristic. It was found to be remarkably hard and exhibited almost no signs of sulfur, which is a common contaminant in iron and a key component of coal itself. This absence of sulfur was the first major clue that this was not a simple lump of iron pyrite, or fool's gold, which can sometimes form in cubic crystals and was a common initial dismissal from skeptics. The object was solid and showed clear evidence of having been worked, with its distinct shape and that curious groove. It was initially housed at the Salzburg Museum, where it was labeled simply as cube of iron from the coal period, a deceptively mundane description for such a baffling find. The mystery of the cube demanded scientific scrutiny, and it has been subjected to several rounds of analysis over the decades. In the 1960s, researchers at the Vienna Natural History Museum conducted a more thorough investigation. Using advanced spectral analysis, they confirmed the primary composition was iron, but they also detected traces of nickel and chromium. This specific alloy profile is significant because it rules out crude, primitive human ironworking, which would not have involved such alloying elements, and it also pointed away from it being a simple meteorite. While nickel iron is common in meteors, the specific ratio and the presence of chromium did not fit the typical profile of a known space rock. The tests seemed to confirm that the object was a piece of manufactured steel, a crafted artifact, yet it was an artifact impossibly out of time, sealed in coal that was millions of years old. Theories attempting to explain the Wolfsegg iron are as varied as they are contentious, each trying to resolve the fundamental paradox of its existence. The most accepted mainstream explanation is that it is, in fact, a meteorite fragment. Proponents of this view suggest that a nickel-iron meteorite could have fallen to Earth during the Miocene period, and through a rare and specific set of geological circumstances, became encased in the forming coal bed. The seemingly artificial shape and groove, they argue, could be the result of natural weathering and tumbling during its journey through space and atmosphere, or from the immense pressures it experienced over eons underground. This theory provides a natural, if uncommon, origin for the object, neatly sidestepping the need for an advanced prehistoric civilization. A more provocative theory, and the one that makes the Wolfsegg iron a classic OOP art, is that it is precisely what it appears to be, a manufactured object from a time before recorded history. If this is true, the implications are staggering. It would suggest that a technologically advanced culture, capable of smelting iron and creating steel alloys, existed on Earth millions of years before Homo sapiens evolved. This has led to radical speculations about lost civilizations, perhaps the source of the Atlantis myth, whose entire existence was wiped clean by some global cataclysm, leaving only scattered, nearly indestructible relics like this iron cube as evidence of their passing. The cube becomes a solitary data point, a metallic whisper from a world we can scarcely imagine. a third, more nuanced possibility exists, one that bridges the gap between these two extremes. Some researchers have proposed that the object could be a geofact, a natural geological formation that only coincidentally resembles a human-made object. They suggest that under extreme heat and pressure, certain mineral concretions can form in geometric shapes, and the central groove could be the result of a softer mineral seam that later eroded away. While this explains the shape, it struggles to account for the sophisticated alloy composition revealed by the spectral analysis. The debate ultimately hinges on interpretation. Is the Wolfsegg iron a perfectly natural phenomenon that we have misinterpreted due to its unusual appearance? Or is it a genuine anomaly that forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of intelligent life and technological achievement on our planet? It remains a physical touchstone for one of the most profound questions in alternative history, a heavy iron question mark buried in the heart of a block of coal. From the perplexing metallic objects of Europe, we journey next to the river valleys of Colombia, where a collection of small, golden artifacts has ignited one of the most visually compelling debates in all of archaeology. These are the Quimbaya artifacts, a treasure trove of hundreds of gold figurines crafted by the Quimbaya civilization, which thrived between the 3rd and 7th centuries AD. To the untrained eye, they are simply exquisite examples of pre-Columbian artistry, but upon closer inspection, a number of these objects reveal a form that is startlingly familiar to the modern mind. They don't look like stylized people or local deities. They look, for all the world, like sleek, modern jet aircraft. The most famous of these, often called the Quimbaya airplanes, feature a set of design elements that are impossible to ignore. You can clearly see a streamlined fuselage, a distinct cockpit or canopy area, and most tellingly, a set of delta-shaped wings that are perfectly horizontal and integrated into the body. Perhaps the most convincing detail is the presence of a vertical tail stabilizer, a feature that is absolutely critical for stable flight in a fixed-wing aircraft, but one that is completely non-existent in the natural animal kingdom. When you place one of these golden figures side by side with a scale model of a modern fighter jet or a commercial airliner, the resemblance is nothing short of breathtaking. The proportions are aerodynamic, the wings are set at an angle that would generate lift, and the overall shape is designed to minimize drag and cut smoothly through the air. This has led to a fascinating scientific experiment that has fueled the mystery for decades. Aeronautical engineers, intrigued by the design, have constructed precise, scaled-up models of these Quimbaya artifacts. When these models are equipped with a small motor and propeller, they don't just fall out of the sky, they fly. They demonstrate stable, controlled flight characteristics, capable of performing maneuvers and gliding gracefully. This isn't a matter of vague resemblance, it is a matter of functional, aerodynamic engineering. The objects, when interpreted as aircraft, are demonstrably airworthy, a fact that pushes the mystery beyond mere coincidence and into the realm of a profound historical puzzle. Of course, the mainstream archaeological interpretation offers a very different and far more grounded explanation. The overwhelming consensus among experts is that these are highly stylized representations of local fauna. The most commonly cited candidates are birds, fish, or even insects. Proponents of this view argue that the fuselage is simply a stylized animal body, the wings are stylized fins or feathers, and the tail is a stylized tail fin. They point out that the Quimbaya culture was masterful at creating abstract and symbolic art, and that we are guilty of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes like airplanes in random or unrelated forms. They emphasize that there is no corroborating evidence whatsoever for advanced technology in pre-Columbian South America. No runways, no engine parts, no tools for metalworking beyond goldsmithing, and no written or oral traditions describing flight. To them, the idea that these are airplanes is a classic case of projecting our modern world, you onto an ancient culture whose symbolic language we have simply misunderstood. This clash of interpretations creates a fascinating intellectual battleground. Those who see the artifacts as evidence of lost knowledge ask a very pointed question. If these are just stylized animals, why do they include a vertical stabilizer, a feature that no bird, fish, or insect possesses? In nature, tails are almost always horizontal, used for steering or propulsion. A vertical tail is a purely technological solution to the problem of yaw stability in fixed-wing flight, a problem that ancient people would have had no reason to contemplate, let alone incorporate into their art. This single feature is the linchpin of the entire mystery. It suggests that the artist was not just depicting a living creature, but was replicating the form of a machine designed for flight. This has given rise to some of the most captivating and controversial theories in alternative history. Could the Quimbayar have witnessed and then meticulously modeled actual flying machines? Some researchers point to the possibility of a now vanished, advanced civilization in the Americas, whose technological achievements were almost entirely lost, leaving behind only these cryptic golden models as a clue. A more radical theory, popularized by ancient astronaut proponents, suggests that the Quimbayar artists were depicting spacecraft or aerial vehicles of extraterrestrial visitors, whom they would have interpreted as gods or powerful spirits from the sky. While these ideas exist far outside mainstream academia, they speak to the powerful and visceral reaction these objects provoke. They force us to confront the possibility that our timeline of technological progress is not just incomplete, but may be missing entire chapters of innovation and discovery that rose and fell long before our own era began. The Quimbayar airplanes, therefore, are more than just golden trinkets. They are a Rorschach test. You can look at them and see a beautifully crafted bird, a testament to human artistic expression. Or you can look at them and see the ghost of a jet engine's roar echoing from a past that holds secrets we are only beginning to imagine. Now we turn our gaze to the walls of an ancient Egyptian temple, where a carving has sparked a debate that illuminates the tension between symbolic interpretation and literal technological possibility. High on a wall within the Hathor temple at Dendera is a series of remarkable stone reliefs. Within a series of large, oval objects, often described as resembling giant light bulbs, you can see a snake-like form stretching from one end to the other. This snake is held in place by a human figure, while the entire bulbous object is supported by a pillar which some have likened to an insulating stand. A cable seems to run from the base of this assembly, connecting it to a box that is being tended by another figure. To the modern eye, the resemblance to an archaic electrical light bulb, complete with a glowing filament and a power source, is immediate and almost uncanny. This is the mystery of the Dendera light. The standard Egyptological interpretation, however, paints a very different and deeply symbolic picture. Mainstream scholars identify the scene not as a technical diagram, but as a profound religious creation myth. The oval object is not a glass bulb, but a depiction of a lotus flower, a plant of immense spiritual significance in ancient Egypt, representing rebirth and the dawn of creation. The snake emerging from the flower is not a filament, but a snake god, most likely representing the deity Harsomptus, an aspect of the larger god Horus. In this mythological context, the scene illustrates the moment of cosmic creation, where the sun god, in his serpent form, is born from the primordial lotus that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. The supporting pillar is seen as a symbolic jed pillar, representing stability, and the entire tableau is a visual hymn to the generative power of the gods, a story carved in stone for initiates and priests to contemplate, not for engineers to replicate. Yet, the alternative theory insists that we are missing the forest for the trees, or rather, the technology for the symbolism. Proponents of the ancient electricity theory argue that the depiction is just too mechanically specific to be dismissed as pure myth. They point to the precise, contained nature of the snake within the bulb, which does not look like a natural creature emerging from a flower, but rather like a defined, isolated element. The cable connecting to a box, which they interpret as a power source or a battery akin to the Baghdad battery, and the insulating pillar all suggest a functional assembly. This theory gains further traction when combined with a persistent architectural mystery found elsewhere in Egypt, the profound and perplexing absence of soot. Deep within the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, in intricate subterranean passages like those in the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, artisans carved and painted breathtakingly detailed hieroglyphs and murals in total darkness on surfaces dozens of feet high. If they were using torches or oil lamps for illumination, the ceilings and walls should be covered in layers of black, oily soot. Yet, in many of these sealed, deep chambers, the stone surfaces are astonishingly clean. How did they achieve such precise artistic work without any apparent source of light that would leave behind this telltale residue? The ancient electricity theory offers a compelling solution. They used electric arc lamps powered by primitive batteries, with the dendera relief serving as the instruction manual for their technology. This creates a fascinating standoff between two entirely different worldviews. The mainstream view asks us to see the dendera carvings through the lens of the people who created them, a culture whose entire understanding of the universe was expressed through a rich and complex tapestry of gods, symbols, and mythology. To them, the idea of a light bulb would be an absurd anachronism, a projection of our modern technological mindset onto a spiritual art form. The alternative view, however, challenges us to consider that our ancestors may have been practical geniuses and that their spiritual symbols might have been a way of encoding and preserving advanced practical knowledge. The debate ultimately forces us to decide what we believe about the capabilities of the past. Are we looking at a beautiful metaphor for the birth of a god? Or are we looking at the schematics for a lost technology that lit the way for the pharaohs in the pitch-black depths of their most sacred tombs? The walls of Dendera hold their silence, offering an image that continues to shine a light, not on ancient chambers, but on our own assumptions about the journey of human innovation. Our exploration now takes us to the high Himalayas, to a story that feels more like a modern myth than a historical discovery. Yet it persists as a captivating image in the study of ancient mysteries. This is the tale of the Lolodov plate, a disc-shaped object that is said to have been found in a cave in Nepal sometime in the early 20th century. The plate, which appears to be made of a dark, stone-like material, is dominated by a magnificent clockwise spiraling groove that draws the eye toward its center. Etched along this spiral path are a series of symbols and figures that tell a story, or at the very least present a scene that is startlingly anachronistic. At the very heart of the plate, positioned as the focal point of the entire design, is a single, large figure. Its appearance is what has captured the imagination of ufologists and alternative historians worldwide. It possesses a large, hairless head, oversized, almond-shaped eyes, and a slender, diminutive body. In short, it looks exactly like the archetypal gray alien of modern abduction lore. This being is positioned next to a distinct, disc-shaped object that rests on the ground, an object with a classic domed saucer profile that we would instantly identify today as an unidentified flying object. The narrative surrounding the plate's origin is as elusive as the object itself. It is primarily associated with a Polish professor named Sergei Lolodov, who allegedly purchased the plate from the local people who discovered it. The claims made about its age are nothing short of extraordinary, with some proponents suggesting it is 12,000 years old. If this dating were accurate, it would mean that an artist or chronicler from the deep past, long before the rise of any known civilization in the region, created a perfect depiction of an extraterrestrial being and its spacecraft, an image that would only become a cultural staple in the 20th century. The implication is staggering. It would suggest that the phenomenon of gray aliens is not a modern psychological construct, but a literal, physical reality that has been interacting with humanity for millennia. For those who believe in the ancient astronaut theory, the Lolodov plate is a smoking gun, a piece of hard evidence carved in stone that proves our ancestors witnessed and recorded visits from otherworldly beings, preserving their image for future generations to finally understand. However, the entire edifice of this incredible story is built upon a foundation that most archaeologists and historians find incredibly shaky. The most significant problem is the complete lack of a verifiable provenance. There are no official excavation records, no peer-reviewed scientific papers detailing its discovery, and no photographs of it in situ. The plate itself resides in the private collection of a man named Erich von Däniken, the famous and controversial author who championed the ancient astronaut hypothesis in his best-selling book, Chariots of the Gods. This connection is, for skeptics, a major red flag. The plate first came to public prominence through von Däniken's work, and its imagery fits his theories perfectly. The primary and most widely accepted explanation within the academic community is that the Lolodov plate is a modern artistic creation, likely crafted in the 20th century, either as a piece of folk art, a deliberate hoax, or even a work inspired by the burgeoning UFO culture of the 1950s and 60s. The crisp, clear lines of the etching show very little of the wear and weathering one would expect from an object that had endured 12,000 years of existence. The debate over the plate highlights a fundamental conflict in the study of anomalous artifacts. Its proponents point to the sheer uniqueness and specificity of the imagery as evidence of its authenticity. Why would a forger or an artist, especially one in a remote part of the world, create such a precise image of a gray alien before that image had even become standardized in Western popular culture? They argue that the spiral design itself is a powerful and ancient symbol found in many cultures, often representing cosmic energy or spiritual journey, and that its use here lends a sense of timelessness and significance to the scene. For them, the plate is a rare and precious data point, a visual record that has survived against all odds. On the other hand, skeptics counter that the plate style is not consistent with any known prehistoric art from the Nepal region. The depiction is too clean, too literal, and too perfectly aligned with 20th century UFO iconography to be genuine. They suggest it is a classic example of a psychic artifact, an object that seems to validate a modern belief system so perfectly that its adherents are willing to overlook the complete absence of a credible chain of custody or scientific verification. The Lolodov plate, therefore, exists in a liminal space between evidence and icon. It is less an archaeological find and more a cultural Rorschach test. You can look at its spiraling design and see a profound message from the dawn of time, or you can see a clever and compelling piece of modern myth-making, a story carved not in ancient stone, but in the very human desire to find company among the stars. But let's travel north to a misty quarry on the coast of Scotland, where another tool was found that presents the same confounding puzzle, yet with its own unique twist. In 1844, workers at the Kingoody Quarry, northwest of Dundee, were tasked with excavating large blocks of stone for construction. As they split open a solid block of natural, ancient sandstone, something utterly unexpected tumbled out. Embedded deep within the rock was a simple, well-made iron tool, a hammer, complete with a portion of its wooden handle still firmly lodged in its head. The tool itself was unremarkable, the kind a 19th century worker might use. The predicament was its location. It wasn't lying on the ground. It was completely encased within a solid bed of sandstone from the Devonian period, a geological era that stretches back an almost unimaginable 400 million years. The immediate and obvious problem is the timeline. The Devonian period is famously known as the Age of Fishes, a time when the first amphibians were just beginning to crawl onto land, and the vast coal forests that would eventually form the very bedrock of Scotland were still millions of years in the future. The idea of a tool-bearing human, let alone one capable of forging iron, existing in such a distant epoch is, from a conventional scientific standpoint, a physical impossibility. The hammer simply should not have been there. The sandstone block itself was part of a solid, undisturbed geological formation, lying at a significant depth below the surface, which argued strongly against it being a recent intrusion. For those who discovered it, the conclusion was inescapable. They had found an object from a time before human history, a relic that defied everything they understood about the world. This artifact, now known as the Kingoody hammer, immediately sparked a fierce debate that echoes the one surrounding the London hammer, but with a key distinction in the nature of the rock. The stone encasing the Kingoody hammer was not a concretion which can form relatively quickly, but a solid, sedimentary sandstone bed laid down over millions of years. This context makes the conventional explanation offered for the London hammer, that of rapid mineral concretion, far less plausible. How could a modern tool become sealed inside a stone that took eons to form? This geological certainty has led some to propose a truly radical theory, that the hammer is a relic from a pre-human industrial civilization. This idea, often tied to the legend of Atlantis or other lost worlds, suggests that intelligent, tool-using beings evolved on Earth long before humanity, achieved a level of technological sophistication, and then vanished without a trace, perhaps due to a global cataclysm, leaving only a few scattered artifacts like this hammer as evidence of their existence. For proponents of this view, the Kingoody hammer isn't an anomaly. It's a clue, a solitary piece of evidence pointing to a cycle of civilization and collapse that our current historical models completely ignore. The mainstream scientific community, however, approaches the mystery with a different set of tools, focusing on geology and the principles of stratigraphy. The most widely accepted explanation involves a phenomenon known as a geologic fault or fissure. Skeptics propose that a narrow crack or fissure must have existed in the ancient sandstone block, perhaps caused by seismic activity or the natural settling of the rock layers over millennia. Through this fissure, a relatively modern hammer could have fallen or been washed in, perhaps by water carrying silt and sand. Over time, this fissure could have become completely filled with newer mineral deposits, which then hardened, creating the illusion that the hammer was embedded in the solid, original rock. When the quarrymen split the stone, it broke along the line of this weaker, filled fissure, making it appear as if the hammer had been inside the solid block itself. This process, while rare, is geologically possible and provides a natural mechanism for mixing objects from vastly different time periods. Another point of contention lies in the wooden handle. The fact that a piece of organic material survived inside the stone is often cited as proof of its great antiquity. However, scientists counter that the specific conditions inside a sealed, dry, and chemically stable environment like a sandstone cavity could potentially preserve wood for centuries, if not longer, especially if it was already partially mineralized. The handle's survival is remarkable, but not necessarily proof of a 400 million year age. Furthermore, the style of the hammerhead itself is distinctly 19th century, a design that shows no signs of the primitive forging techniques one would expect from a truly ancient, let alone a pre-human civilization. Its presence is a chronological paradox. Its design is utterly mundane. This juxtaposition lies at the heart of the mystery. Is it an impossibly ancient object that just happens to look exactly like a common tool from the 1800s? Or is it a common tool from the 1800s that found itself in an impossibly ancient-looking situation? The Kingoody hammer, like so many of these artifacts, ultimately forces us to confront the limits of our interpretation. It presents us with a stark choice between two narratives, each with its own profound implications. One narrative requires us to rewrite the entire history of life on Earth. inserting a forgotten chapter of industrial activity into the deep past. The other requires us to accept a series of highly specific and fortuitous geological events that conspired to create a perfect illusion. The hammer itself, now housed in the National Museum of Scotland, offers no easy answers. It sits silently, a simple tool that has become a symbol of one of history's greatest riddles, challenging us to question whether the solid ground of our past is as stable and well understood as we believe. Our journey now takes us to the heart of Mexico, to a discovery that seems to have pulled a face from the ancient Mediterranean world and planted it firmly in the soil of the pre-Columbian Americas. In 1933, a team of archaeologists led by José Garcia Payon was excavating a burial site at Calixtlahuaca in the Toluca Valley. The site belonged to the Tecaxic people, a culture linked to the mighty Aztec Empire, and the burial they were investigating was securely dated to a time before the Spanish conquest, somewhere between the 12th and 14th centuries. As they carefully worked through the layers, they uncovered a small terracotta artifact, a sculpted head just a few inches tall. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a typical Mesoamerican figurine, but a second look revealed something profoundly out of place. This was not a stylized representation of a local deity or a tribal elder. This head had distinctly European features, a full, bearded face, a sharp, aquiline nose, and most notably, a style of headwear called a pileus, a pointed cap that was commonly worn by Roman sailors, philosophers, and freed slaves in the classical world. It looked for all the world like a miniature Roman artifact, yet it had been buried in a sealed, pre-Columbian grave in central Mexico. The stylistic analysis of this Tecaxic Calixtlahuaca head is what cements its status as a profound anomaly. Experts in Roman art who have examined it have noted its striking resemblance to sculptures from the Roman Hellenistic period, specifically from the 2nd century AD. The technique used to create the beard, the rendering of the facial structure, and the specific type of terracotta used are all characteristic of Roman workshops from that era. This creates a chronological and geographical puzzle of the highest order. If this head is authentic to its context, it means that a Roman object, or perhaps even a Roman traveler, reached the shores of the Americas a full millennium before the voyages of Christopher Columbus and nearly 1400 years before the Spanish conquistadors arrived. The implications of such a possibility are staggering, suggesting that the vast oceans were not the impassable barriers we once believed, and that sporadic, accidental contact between the old and new worlds may have occurred throughout antiquity, leaving behind only the faintest, most enigmatic of clues. This single artifact has, understandably, ignited a fierce and ongoing scholarly debate, one that pits the integrity of the archaeological context against the seemingly impossible narrative it proposes. On one side, skeptics offer a compelling and logical explanation: colonial-era contamination. The argument is that the head is a genuine Roman artifact, but one that was introduced to the site much later. It could have been brought to Mexico by a Spanish colonist in the 16th or 17th century as a curiosity or personal belonging. Through some accident, perhaps lost, discarded, or even placed as an offering by a native convert familiar with European objects, it could have become mixed into the upper layers of the soil. Over centuries, natural processes like burrowing animals, erosion, or even the initial archaeological excavation itself could have caused it to sink deeper, inadvertently contaminating the pre-Columbian burial context and creating a false association. This is a well-documented phenomenon in archaeology, and for many mainstream historians, it is the most plausible solution to an otherwise earth-shattering paradox. However, those who argue for the head's authenticity present a powerful counter-argument based on the specific circumstances of its discovery. José Garcia Payon was a respected and experienced archaeologist, and his excavation notes describe the head as being found in a sealed, undisturbed context beneath 3 intact floor layers of a pyramidal structure. This was not an object found loosely in the topsoil. It was reportedly embedded within a sealed, datable stratum, making the possibility of later intrusion far less likely. In the 1990s, the head was subjected to thermoluminescence dating, a scientific method that measures the last time a piece of fired clay was exposed to intense heat. The results dated the head's firing to somewhere between 900 and 1250 AD, a time frame that perfectly matches the pre-Columbian burial context and firmly rules out it being a colonial-era Spanish import. This scientific validation gives tremendous weight to the argument that the head is exactly what it appears to be, a genuine Roman object in ancient America. If we accept this possibility, even tentatively, a world of fascinating speculation opens up. How could a Roman artifact have reached Mexico? The most plausible scenario involves a ship, perhaps a Roman merchant vessel loaded with goods from the Red Sea or North Africa, being caught in a storm and swept drastically off course by the Atlantic's currents. The Canary Current and the North Equatorial Current form a kind of oceanic conveyor belt that could have carried a disabled ship from the coast of North Africa directly to the Gulf of Mexico. If any survivors made it to shore, they would have been in a world utterly alien to them. They might have been integrated into the local society, their strange object becoming a valued curiosity, perhaps eventually placed in a burial as a grave good of great significance. The head may not represent a planned voyage of exploration, but a desperate tale of shipwreck and survival, a single, accidental thread tying together two worlds that history insists were meant to remain apart. The Tekaxitlahuaca head stands as a quiet, terracotta challenge to the narrative of an isolated new world. It is a tiny, fragile piece of evidence that carries the weight of a 1,000-year-old mystery, forcing us to wonder just how many other stories of ancient voyagers have been lost to time, leaving behind only a solitary, stone-faced witness to their impossible journey. Our next stop takes us to the serene shores of Lake Winnipesaukee in New England, where a discovery was made that remains one of America's most charming and enduring local mysteries. In 1872, workers digging a hole for a fence post on the property of a man named Seneca Ladd in the town of Meredith, New Hampshire, struck something unusual about a foot beneath the surface. It wasn't a rock in the ordinary sense, but a dark, oddly shaped and strangely smooth object that they carefully unearthed. What they pulled from the earth was an incredibly unique artifact, a perfectly egg-shaped stone about 4 inches long and 2.5 inches thick, meticulously carved from a hard, quartz-rich rock similar to granite. Seneca Ladd, a successful and cultured businessman, was fascinated by the find, immediately displaying it as a remarkable curio. It was so perplexing that it was soon dubbed the Mystery Stone, a name that has stuck for over a century and a half, perfectly capturing the essence of an object that seems to offer answers but gives none. What makes this stone so captivating are the intricate and varied symbols carved with remarkable precision across its entire surface. It's a tiny canvas packed with enigmatic imagery that seems to draw from different worlds. On one side, you can clearly see a face with simple, deep-set eyes and a mouth. Just below this face is a striking, detailed carving of an ear of corn, with each kernel distinctly defined. On the opposite side, there's a classic cone-shaped teepee or wigwam, and next to it, a simple spiral. But the carvings don't stop there. Wrapping around the stone are other symbols, including what looks like a star-like circle with a face in the center, an arrow that appears to be piercing an arc, and several sets of precise numerical style markings. The level of detail is astonishing, with fine lines and smooth, rounded holes drilled completely through the stone from top to bottom, holes that are perfectly cylindrical and uniform, a feat that would have required a specialized tool. This is not crude, primitive work. It is the product of a highly skilled artisan with access to advanced carving technology for the time, whenever that time may have been. This combination of features has spawned a wide range of theories, each attempting to pin down the stone's elusive origin. The most intuitive explanation is that it is a significant Native American artifact. The imagery of corn, a staple crop, and the teepee strongly point toward indigenous culture. Some speculate it could have been a powerful talisman, a ceremonial object used in rituals related to fertility or agriculture, perhaps passed down between spiritual leaders. The holes might have been used to mount it on a staff or to allow a liquid to pass through it during a ceremony. However, many Native American scholars and archaeologists point out that the art style is not consistent with any known local tribes. The face, in particular, does not resemble typical indigenous representations, and the mix of symbols feels almost like a pastiche, a collection of items someone thought represented Native American life rather than an authentic cultural product. This inconsistency led to the prominent theory that the stone is an elaborate Victorian-era hoax. The 19th century was a time of great fascination with curiosities and antiquities, and creating clever forgeries was a popular pastime. A skilled artisan, possibly even commissioned by Seneca, lad himself to create a unique conversation piece, could have crafted the stone. The precision of the drill holes is a key point here. They are so perfect that some researchers believe they could only have been made with powered 19th century machinery. The hodgepodge of symbols, a face, corn, a teepee, could be seen as a romanticized white American vision of native culture, designed to be intriguing and exotic rather than historically accurate. In this view, the mystery stone is not an ancient relic but a product of its time, a testament to 19th century ingenuity and a fascination with the mysterious. A third, more folkloric theory suggests the stone could be a thunderstone. In various European traditions, objects with unusual shapes that were plowed up from fields were sometimes believed to be thunderbolts hurled by gods from the sky, possessing magical properties. While this doesn't explain its crafted features, it offers a cultural context for why such an object would be revered and preserved, even if its origins were misunderstood by those who found it. Ultimately, despite being subjected to analysis by the State Historical Society and even being displayed at the Museum of New Hampshire History, the stone's true purpose and creator remain completely unknown. It is an artifact without a culture, a message without a language. The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone endures not because it provides evidence of lost civilizations or alien contact, but because of its quiet, humble perplexity. It is a beautifully crafted question mark, a small, polished enigma that reminds us that history's mysteries can be found not just in grand tombs and deserts, but right in our own backyards, buried just beneath the surface. From the curated mysteries of private collections and museum vaults, we now journey to one of the most remote and desolate locations on our list, a place where the landscape itself seems to whisper of ancient, forgotten secrets. Nestled deep within the Kadam Basin in China's Qinghai province, an arid and mountainous region often compared to the surface of Mars, lies the enigma of the Beigong Pipes. The setting is Mount Beigong, where a striking, pyramid-shaped rock formation stands as a silent sentinel over a terrain of stark beauty. It is here, on the face of this natural pyramid and the barren shore of the nearby Tossan Lake, a briny saltwater lake, that explorers discovered something that defies simple explanation, a network of mysterious, rusty iron pipes. These are not random scraps of metal. The Beigong Pipes are a seemingly organized system of tubular structures, ranging dramatically in size from mere centimeters to nearly 16 inches in diameter. They are not simply lying on the surface, they protrude from the solid rock of the pyramid and run deep into the ground in what appears to be a deliberate, intelligently designed layout. Some of the pipes lead directly into the salty waters of Tossan Lake, while others vanish into the heart of the mountain itself. Their arrangement is so systematic that it has been described by those who have visited the site as resembling the plumbing or ventilation system of a vast subterranean complex, a fossilized industrial site from a time before human memory. When samples of these pipes were taken for analysis, The results sent a shockwave through the small community of researchers who study such anomalies. Official analysis conducted by a smeltery institute in China reportedly dated the pipes to around 150,000 years ago. This date is the core of the entire mystery, as it places the creation of these iron artifacts firmly in the Pleistocene epoch, a time when, according to conventional history, Homo sapiens was just beginning its journey out of Africa, and no human culture possessed the knowledge of smelting metal, let alone creating complex tubular structures embedded in solid rock. This profound chronological paradox has, understandably, given rise to some of the most spectacular theories in all of alternative history. One compelling line of thought suggests that the Beigong pipes are the remains of a massive prehistoric power plant or industrial facility. The proximity to the saltwater lake is key to this hypothesis. Proponents argue that the system could have used the water to generate steam or to cool machinery, with the pipes acting as conduits for liquids, gases, or even electrical wiring for a complex we can scarcely imagine. This theory posits the existence of a highly advanced human civilization, perhaps the source of the Mu or Atlantis legends, that achieved a technological zenith before being wiped out by a global cataclysm, leaving only these rusted, skeletal remains in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. An even more radical theory, and one that has captured the public imagination, connects the pipes to extraterrestrial activity. The site's remote, otherworldly landscape and the pyramid-like shape of the mountain have led ufologists to propose that Beigong was once an alien launch site or a research outpost. In this scenario, the pipes were part of the infrastructure for a spacecraft refueling station, perhaps processing water or minerals, or part of an environmental control system for a base buried within the mountain. The precise, engineered appearance of the pipes set against the primitive landscape fuels the idea that this was not a human construction, but the work of visitors who used Earth as a temporary home, leaving behind this cryptic evidence of their stay. The theories are as grand as the landscape is vast, suggesting a history for our planet that is intertwined with star-faring cultures. However, mainstream geology offers a very different and far more prosaic set of explanations that seek to demystify the site entirely. The most widely accepted scientific theory is that the so-called pipes are not artifacts at all, but spectacular examples of fossilized tree roots. This natural process, known as rhizolith formation, occurs when the root systems of ancient trees become permeated with mineral-rich water. Over immense periods of time, the organic root material decays and is replaced by iron oxides and other minerals, effectively creating a solid, tube-shaped cast of the original root within the surrounding rock. As the softer surrounding stone erodes away over millennia, these incredibly durable, iron-cemented casts are left behind, often in branching, pipe-like formations. This process can perfectly explain the variation in pipe sizes and their seemingly organized, branching patterns, which mimic the structure of a tree's root system. Another geological explanation points to the natural formation of hydrothermal veins. In this process, hot, mineral-rich fluids can force their way through cracks and fissures in the bedrock. When these fluids cool and deposit their mineral content, they can form long, tube-like structures that strongly resemble manufactured pipes. The specific iron-rich composition of the Beigong pipes aligns with what would be expected from such a process. Geologists argue that the Pyramid Mountain itself is likely a natural geological formation, and that human pattern recognition, our innate tendency to see deliberate design in random shapes, is responsible for interpreting these natural mineral formations as the work of intelligent beings. They point out that the reported date of 150,000 years, while ancient, is perfectly plausible for such geological processes which operate on a scale of millions of years. The debate over the Beigong pipes ultimately hinges on a fundamental question of interpretation. Are we looking at the rusted infrastructure of a lost world, a complex that hummed with activity when early humans were just learning to use fire? Or are we witnessing a magnificent geological fluke, a quirk of nature that has fooled us into seeing the ghosts of industry in the slow, patient work of mineral deposition and erosion? The site's extreme remoteness has limited extensive, repeated scientific study, leaving a vacuum that imagination is all too eager to fill. The Bagong pipes thus stand as a powerful symbol in the clash between mystery and material science, a network of silent, iron questions embedded in a mountain that refuses to give up its secrets, challenging us to decide whether we are seeing the ruins of a forgotten age or simply the breathtaking art of the earth itself. Now we venture to the very cradle of civilization itself, the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, where the ancient Ubaid culture laid the groundwork for everything that would follow. Flourishing between 5,500 and 4,000 BC, long before the rise of the Sumerians, the Ubaid people were pioneers of irrigation, architecture, and social organization. Their legacy is preserved in countless terracotta figurines, most of which depict the ordinary lives of the people, mothers holding children, people grinding grain. But among these mundane artifacts is a collection of startlingly unusual statuettes that stand in stark contrast to everything else. These figures, often found in graves, are humanoid in shape, but their features are anything but human. They possess elongated, cone-shaped heads that are completely hairless, with faces dominated by large, slit-like, almond-shaped eyes that slant upwards. Their most bizarre feature, however, is their bodies, which are often depicted with strangely muscular, almost scaly-looking skin, and their shoulders are hunched, giving them a distinctly reptilian or amphibious posture. Perhaps the most unsettling detail of all is that many of these figures are shown cradling what appears to be a human infant on their hip, an act that feels simultaneously maternal and deeply alien. The mainstream archaeological interpretation of these Ubaid lizardmen, as they've come to be known, is firmly rooted in the symbolic and spiritual world of this prehistoric society. Scholars propose that these are highly stylized representations of deities or powerful spiritual beings, likely associated with fertility, water, and the life-giving forces of nature. In the harsh environment of Mesopotamia, the ability to control water was synonymous with survival and power. Reptiles and amphibians, like lizards and frogs, were deeply connected to water in the Ubaid worldview. They emerged from the mud after the floods. They were symbols of regeneration and the mysterious underworld. By creating figurines that blended human and reptilian traits, the Ubaid people may have been attempting to visualize a powerful, chthonic god, a being that wielded control over the very elements that sustained their society. The prominent portrayal of these figures breastfeeding or holding infants strongly supports this fertility interpretation. They may represent a mother goddess, but one conceived not in a soft human form, but in the powerful, primal image of a creature from the earth and water, embodying a raw, untamed power of creation that was both nurturing and fearsome. These were not meant to be portraits of literal beings, but symbolic vessels for the most potent and vital forces in their universe. However, this culturally grounded explanation is challenged by a far more speculative and visually compelling theory that has captured the modern imagination. When you look at these figurines with their elongated skulls, large eyes, and slender bodies, the resemblance to the grey aliens of contemporary UFO lore is immediately striking. This visual parallel has fueled an alternative narrative that completely reinterprets their purpose. Proponents of the ancient astronaut theory suggest that the Ubaid lizardmen are not symbolic art at all, but accurate depictions of an actual, non-human species that interacted with, or perhaps even ruled over, early humanity. In this radical view, these figurines are prehistoric documentary evidence, the Ubaid people's attempt to create effigies of their overlords or their gods, who were in fact a race of reptilian beings. The scenes of these figures nursing human babies take on a far more sinister and provocative meaning in this context. They could be interpreted as depicting a hybridization program where these reptilian beings are actively involved in the manipulation of human genetics, a theme that is a cornerstone of many modern conspiracy theories about secret alien agendas and a hidden history of human origins. The debate between these two views is a classic clash of methodologies. Archaeologists point to the cultural context, highlighting that the Ubaid culture had a rich tradition of stylized art, and that exaggerating features was a common way to denote importance and otherworldliness. They argue that we are projecting our own modern fascination with extraterrestrials onto a people for whom such a concept would have been incomprehensible. The ancient astronaut theorists, however, counter with a simple, powerful question: why reptiles? Of all the animals in their environment, lions, bulls, birds, why did they choose to blend the human form so specifically with the features of a lizard? They argue that the consistency of the depiction across hundreds of figurines suggests a consistent, real-world model, not just a fleeting artistic whim. The Ubaid lizardmen stand as one of the most visually arresting puzzles from our deep past. They are either a profound testament to the human capacity for symbolic thought and the creation of complex religious iconography, or they are the earliest known portrait gallery of our true extraterrestrial ancestors, silently judging us from the dust of a 7,000-year-old grave. And now we arrive at a mystery that feels like it was pulled straight from the pages of a mythological epic, yet it rests in the tangible form of strange stone objects scattered across the landscape of Sri Lanka. Known locally as sky arrows or revered as thunderbolts of the gods, these artifacts present a puzzle that bridges the gap between ancient legend and hard physical evidence. Imagine holding a stone that is perfectly symmetrical, shaped like a long, slender spearhead or a double-pointed dart. Its form is so sleek and aerodynamic that it seems designed not just for throwing but for cutting through the air with minimal resistance. These are not crude, hand-held axes. They are precision-crafted objects, often featuring a central ridge, finely tapered points, and sometimes even what appear to be small, notched grooves. To the modern eye, they look uncannily like the projectiles for a sophisticated spear-throwing device or even the standard munition for some powerful, ancient crossbow. Their very shape suggests a purpose that is both practical and lethal, a tool engineered for flight and impact. The local legends surrounding these objects are as dramatic as their appearance. For generations, the people of Sri Lanka have referred to them as Vajrayudha, a name that translates to the thunderbolt weapon of the Hindu god Indra, the king of the heavens. The folklore is clear and compelling. These were not man-made tools but divine weapons, literal thunderbolts hurled from the sky by gods during celestial battles. They were believed to be the physical remnants of these epic conflicts, falling to earth and embedding themselves in the soil, where they would be discovered by awestruck humans. This belief system treats the sky arrows not as archaeological curiosities, but as sacred objects, imbued with spiritual power and a direct connection to a time when gods walked the earth and intervened directly in the affairs of the world. This cultural narrative sets the stage for a profound question. Are these stories merely poetic explanations for unusual rocks, or could they be a fragmented, mythological memory of a real historical event, a memory of a technology so advanced it could only be explained as the work of deities? This question inevitably leads to a fierce debate between two opposing schools of thought. On one side, mainstream geologists and archaeologists present a very rational and scientifically grounded explanation. They propose that the sky arrows are not artifacts at all, but remarkable examples of geofacts, natural geological formations that only coincidentally resemble man-made objects. The process cited is usually one of conchoidal fracturing, a specific way that certain types of hard, fine-grained rocks like chert or quartzite break when subjected to immense pressure or thermal stress. When a rock is heated, perhaps by a lightning strike or a forest fire, and then rapidly cooled, it can fracture along planes that create incredibly sharp, symmetrical edges. Over millennia, natural tumbling in rivers or weathering by wind and sand can further polish and refine these shapes, accidentally creating objects that look for all the world like carefully chiseled arrowheads or spear points. According to this view, the sky arrows are a spectacular coincidence, a demonstration of nature's ability to mimic the works of human hands through nothing more than random physical processes. However, this geological explanation is met with significant skepticism from those who study ancient high technologies and lost civilizations. Proponents of this alternative view point to the sheer consistency and perfection of the shapes. While nature can produce one or two coincidental forms, the sky arrows are found in significant numbers, many sharing nearly identical proportions and aerodynamic profiles. This level of repetition and standardization, they argue, is a hallmark of intelligent design, not random chance. Furthermore, the specific locations where these objects are often found, sometimes in areas not known for the specific type of stone from which they are made, suggest they were transported and therefore valued by someone. This has given rise to a captivating and radical theory that the sky arrows are indeed man-made, but they are relics from a forgotten epoch of human history, a time when a sophisticated civilization possessed technologies we have since lost. The most intriguing extension of this theory suggests they were not handheld weapons, but were designed to be used in conjunction with advanced launching mechanisms. Perhaps they were the ammunition for a powerful, large-scale weapon that could hurl these stone projectiles with tremendous force and accuracy over great distances. Some researchers have even speculated about their use in conjunction with sonic or vibrational technology, proposing that they could have been part of a weapon system that used resonant frequencies to shatter stone or disable enemies, a concept that aligns with other legends of Vajra weapons that could unleash the power of lightning and thunder. The local myths of gods wielding thunderbolts in this context could be a mythological interpretation of witnessing such a terrifying and incomprehensible technology in action. The people of the time, lacking the vocabulary for advanced physics and engineering, would have had no other way to describe these powerful, sky-borne projectiles than as the divine weapons of gods. The Sri Lankan sky arrows, therefore, exist at a fascinating crossroads. They are either a stunning geological fluke, a beautiful lie told by the forces of nature, or they are silent, stone witnesses to a chapter of human history that remains hidden from us, a chapter where the line between advanced technology and divine magic was so thin as to be non-existent. Just when you think the timeline of impossible artifacts cannot be stretched any further, we encounter a discovery that pushes the boundaries of time itself into the almost incomprehensibly ancient. Our final artifact takes us to South Africa, to a site known as the Wonderstone Silver Mine, where miners in rock layers dated to a staggering 2.8 billion years old began uncovering small, spherical objects that defy all rational explanation for their age. These are the grooved spheres or the Klerksdorp spheres, and their existence challenges the very foundation of what we know about life, geology, and the possibility of intelligence on a truly primordial Earth. 2.8 billion years ago, our planet was a vastly different place. The atmosphere was toxic, devoid of oxygen, the continents were barren wastelands of rock, and the most complex life form was a single-celled bacterium. This was the Precambrian era, a time so remote that it predates the existence of plants, animals, and even the very oxygen we breathe. In this world of primal geology, the idea of a manufactured object is not just unlikely, it is, by every established scientific principle, an absolute impossibility. The spheres themselves are the source of the mystery. They range in size from less than a centimeter to several inches in diameter, and they are almost perfectly round. But it is their surface detail that catapults them from curious geological oddities into the realm of the profoundly anomalous. Many of these spheres are encircled by 2 or 3 perfectly parallel grooves running around their entire equator. grooves that are so straight and uniform they look as if they were machined by a lathe. Adding another layer to the puzzle is their composition. When analyzed, the spheres were found to be made of a nickel-steel alloy, specifically a variety that includes the mineral pyrite. This is a critical detail because while nickel and iron are common elements, this particular alloy combination is exceptionally rare in nature and possesses a quality that makes the spheres even stranger. They are incredibly hard, far harder than the surrounding rock from which they were extracted. This combination of a precise, manufactured-looking form and an unnatural metallic composition has led to one of the most radical theories in the entire field of out-of-place artifacts. Proponents of this view argue that the grooved spheres are exactly what they appear to be, manufactured objects. If this is true, the implications are nothing short of revolutionary. It would mean that an intelligent, tool-using civilization existed on Earth billions of years before the rise of humanity. This civilization, whatever it was, would have had to develop advanced metallurgy and precision engineering in a world dominated by volcanoes and prokaryotic microbes. This idea forces a complete rewrite of not just human history, but of the entire history of life on our planet, suggesting cycles of civilization and collapse on a scale so vast it dwarfs our entire recorded history into a mere blink of geological time. Some have even taken this a step further, proposing that such a civilization could not possibly have been native to Earth, leading to the extraordinary suggestion that the spheres are artifacts from an extraterrestrial mining or exploratory operation that visited our world in its distant, sterile youth, leaving behind these metallic calling cards embedded in the stone. Mainstream geology, however, offers a series of far more conservative, yet equally fascinating, explanations that seek to resolve the paradox without invoking lost civilizations or ancient astronauts. The most widely accepted theory is that the spheres are not artifacts at all, but naturally formed concretions known as pyrite nodules. Concretions are spherical or oval masses of mineral matter that form when minerals precipitate from water and accumulate around a central nucleus, like a grain of sand or a fossil fragment, much like how a pearl forms around a piece of grit in an oyster. Geologists propose that in the violent, mineral-rich hydrothermal environments around ancient volcanic vents or on the seafloor 2.8 billion years ago, these nodules of pyrite and other iron compounds could have slowly accreted layer by layer, achieving a remarkably spherical shape through the uniform crystallization of the minerals. The process is natural if uncommon and can produce objects of surprising geometric regularity. But what about the enigmatic parallel grooves? How could a natural process create such precise, machined-looking lines? Geologists point to a phenomenon known as conchoidal fracturing and the effects of immense metamorphic pressure. After the spheres formed, they were subjected to billions of years of tectonic forces being buried, heated, and squeezed. The specific crystalline structure of the nickel-steel alloy within the sphere could have caused it to fracture in a very particular way under this pressure. The grooves, they argue, are not cuts, but rather the remnants of internal crystal planes or cleavage lines that became emphasized on the surface as the softer surrounding rock eroded away over eons, leaving the harder metallic sphere behind with these lines exposed. It is a form of natural etching, a ghost image of the sphere's internal crystalline architecture, revealed by the patient and brutal sculpting tools of geology and time. The sphere's unnatural hardness is also explained by this process. The specific conditions of heat and pressure could have forged the metal into an alloy far harder than the sedimentary rock that encased it, creating the illusion that it was artificially tempered. The debate over the grooved spheres ultimately becomes a conflict of interpretation, a choice between two narratives that are both extraordinary in their own right. One narrative sees the hand of an unknown intelligence at work in the dawn of time, a story that re-enchants our planet's past with a mystery of epic proportions. The other narrative asks us to appreciate the profound and often overlooked artistry of natural geological processes, capable of creating forms of stunning symmetry and complexity through nothing more than the blind, patient application of physical and chemical laws over billions of years. The spheres, now housed in the Klerksdorp Museum, sit silently behind glass, their polished surfaces and enigmatic grooves reflecting our own curiosity back at us. They are a testament to the fact that the Earth itself is the greatest mystery of all, a planet that has been patiently assembling its secrets for billions of years, leaving us these cryptic, grooved spheres as a final, silent challenge from the deepest reaches of time. And so we reach the end of our expedition through 25 of history's most baffling relics, a journey that has taken us from the depths of the sea to the heart of the mountains, and across a timeline stretching from the age of dinosaurs to the dawn of human civilization and beyond. Each of these artifacts, in its own unique way, stands as a solitary sentinel challenging the comfortable, linear story of human progress we so often take for granted. The Antikythera Mechanism whispers of a lost golden age of Greek science, while the Baghdad Battery sparks a debate about ancient energy. The Saqqara bird soars on wings of aerodynamic possibility, and the Piri Rise map charts a world that science says should have been buried under miles of ice. From the impossibly old grooved spheres to the controversially modern Koso artifact, each one presents a piece of a puzzle that refuses to form a complete picture, forcing us to acknowledge the profound gaps in our understanding of the past. This grand tapestry of mystery is woven from a fundamental and enduring tension, the clash between the careful, evidence-based interpretations of mainstream archaeology and the bold, paradigm-shattering theories of alternative history. On one side, we have the scientific method with its demand for verifiable proof, repeatable results, and a cautious approach that often explains away anomalies as hoaxes, misidentifications, or rare geological flukes. It is a discipline that rightly prides itself on rigor and skepticism, building our historical knowledge brick by careful brick. On the other side, we find a more speculative but equally passionate pursuit of truth, one that asks the big what-if questions. What if our timeline is wrong? What if civilizations have risen and fallen in cycles we can scarcely comprehend? What if the gods and monsters of our oldest myths were not mere fantasy, but a distorted memory of a reality we have since forgotten? This is not a battle between right and wrong, but a necessary dialogue between two ways of seeing the world, one that seeks to preserve the integrity of our known history, and another that dares to imagine a past that is far stranger, more complex, and infinitely more mysterious. Ultimately, these artifacts do more than just challenge history. They challenge us. They invite us to remain curious, to question authority, and to embrace the wonderful, humbling fact that our world is still filled with enigmas that defy easy explanation. They remind us that the story of humanity is not a simple, straight line from primitive to advanced, but a winding, unpredictable river with hidden depths and forgotten tributaries. The true value of these objects may not lie in a definitive answer, but in the questions they force us to ask about our origins, our capabilities, and our place in the cosmos. They are catalysts for wonder, igniting our imagination and proving that the quest for knowledge is never truly finished. Now, this is where the investigation turns to you. We have navigated this labyrinth of ancient mysteries together, but every explorer has their own perspective. Look back through this incredible list. Which artifact resonated with you the most? Was it the functional genius of the Antikythera Mechanism, the tangible, metallic defiance of the London hammer, or the sheer, otherworldly mystery of the Ubaid lizardmen? Perhaps the coded secrets of the Voynich manuscript captured your imagination, or the global implications of the Takaxic Kalixtlahuaca head. We want to hear your voice in this ongoing conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which artifact you find the most convincing, the most perplexing, or the one you believe has the power to truly rewrite history. Bring your own theories, your research, and your passion. Let's build a community of the curious, because the greatest discoveries are often made not by individuals, but by countless minds coming together, united by a shared sense of wonder for the profound mysteries of